Good evening. I'm Chairperson Mark Kogler, and on behalf of the Commission, we'd like to welcome you to the Planning Commission meeting of August 9th. Our second item of business is the Pledge of Allegiance, so I'd ask you to stand and face the flag and join us, please. Pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Our next item is roll call. Staff, would you please carry out the roll call?
Commissioner Covarrubias.
Here.
Commissioner Davis. Commissioner Jorgensen.
Here.
Commissioner Neal. Commissioner Christensen.
Present.
Commissioner Gibson.
Present.
Chairperson Kogler.
Here.
So the record will reflect Commissioner Davis and Neal are absent. Commissioner Neal did notify us ahead of time that he wasn't going to make the meeting.
Okay, thank you. Staff introductions, please.
Warren Frace, Community Development Director.
Marcy Reynoso and Ashley Peterson, Administrative Assistant.
Katie Bannister, Assistant Planner.
Darcy Delgado.
Darren Nash, City Planner.
Isaac Rosen, Assistant City Attorney.
Sarah Osowitz, Special Counsel.
Okay, thank you. Our next item on the agenda is the general public comments regarding matters not on this evening's agenda. If you have a comment that you would like to make that's, again, not on the agenda in terms of an item this evening, you're welcome to do so. Is there anybody in the room who would like to do that? Seeing none, I would ask, is there anybody?
There's no callers for that.
Okay, all right, very good. Seeing none, we'll move on to our next order of business, which is agenda items that are proposed to be either tabled or rescheduled. Do we have?
There are none.
Okay, very good. All right, we will move on to public hearings. We have two this evening. The first of those is public hearing for plan development, oak tree removal, lot line adjustment, P21-0121, PD 21-13, OTR 21-21, PRLA 21-0054. The applicant is PRG Paso Industrial Holdings, LLC. The project is located at 2150 Wisteria Lane, which is the south side of Wisteria Lane, east of Golden Hill Road at Germain Way. There are a variety of APNs associated with this. The properties, parcels 025-425-016, as well as 019 through 029. With that, as an introduction to the item, I would look to staff for opening remarks and a report.
Thank you, Chairperson Kogler. This is Katie Bannister, Assistant Planner, but Darren Nash, the City Planner, who was the primary point of contact for this project, is also on the line for any questions as we go forward. So this is a project called the Paso Commons. It is located on Wisteria Lane, as the Chairperson mentioned. Here is a location map. So this is east of Golden Hill on Wisteria. You can see the subject parcels there outlined in orange. There is also, this is near the terminus of Wisteria Lane, which is intended to be extended out to Airport Road to the east. Did I do something? Oh, there it goes. So hopefully it's not going to jump too many. But so this is a look at the existing lots that are out there. There are several different tracks that make up the Paso Commons project. So primarily there are two lots to the west of on the west side of the project that are from track 2269, and then there are I believe it's 9 lots from track 2778. The applicant is proposing to merge some of the lots from. Yeah, it went too far. The applicant is proposing to merge lots from track 2778. Lots 1 through 3 would be merged, and then lots 4 through 6 would be merged. There is also a tentative map that's approved to the east of this site, as I mentioned. Track 3069 would extend Wisteria Road out. It would then join with New Airport Road and then out to Airport Road. And so it's just an important piece of the puzzle to remember that this is not, that Wisteria will no longer be the end of Wisteria will no longer be here. So looking at those lot mergers, these were provided to Planning Commission today as an addendum to explain how the lot line adjustment and lot merger will proceed. So there are 2 lot mergers, as I mentioned in the previous slide. So lots 1 through 3 would be merged, as you see on the left, and then lots 4 through 6 would also be merged to make way for some larger buildings. So here is the, once those lots are merged, a lot line adjustment between those lots is proposed. So again, the parcel 1 on the left and parcel 2 on the right. And then there's a small lot line adjustment that would move that line between the 2 lots just a little bit to the east to facilitate circulation and the building, to facilitate the buildings to fit on those sites. So the project is largely a development plan. There is both PM, which is planned industrial, and C3 zoning. You can see on the map to the right, the bulk of the site is in the PM zone. That's that gray area. And then on the east side, there are 3 parcels that are in the C3 zone. And there are some slightly different setbacks requirements for those 2 zones. So that's an important piece to remember. The project includes over 400,000 square feet in warehouse and industrial buildings. There'll be 7 buildings that are proposed. They would go on those 7 lots that are going to be created by the lot mergers that we saw in the previous slide. As I said, the proposed uses are warehousing and industrial uses, and something important for the Planning Commission to remember tonight is that the final architectural and site details for each building will be reviewed by the DRC before building permits are issued for those buildings. So here is a look at the proposed development. As I said, there are 7 buildings. That big green dot was meant to come on as an animation, but there is 1 oak tree on the site that is proposed for removal. So that gives us an idea of where that oak tree is proposed. So 7 buildings, there's 2 prototypes. The applicant is with us, the applicant's representative is with us tonight and will be walking us through all the details of the architecture. So I'm just gonna give kind of a brief summary of the appearance of this project. So as I said, there's an oak tree there on the lot with building 5. There's the, and also, so the orange boundary is the project. And then something to keep in mind is that Tractor Road and Airport Road will be connected just to the south of this site. Shown in yellow there is some conceptual idea of how those 2 roads will be connected. And so the property for building 6 will have to dedicate some right of way for Tractor Road. So here are some renderings, and I'm sure the applicant's going to walk us through these as well, but this is just intended to give you a flavor of what's proposed. So these are large industrial warehousing buildings. So here's some renderings. I'm just going to kind of scoot through these because the applicant will be giving us a lot more detail. As I said, there are 7 buildings. They are to the south of Wisteria Road. You can see IQMS, or the former IQMS, there on the left, the Justin buildings off in the distance. The DRC did review this project and did make some comments. The applicant is going to respond to each of these more specifically, but there were some concerns about some white walls that were on the prototype building A, some questions about ingress and egress, fencing materials, some additional screening, and then landscaping along Wisteria is also going to be discussed. So as I said, there is 1 oak tree proposed for removal. The municipal code does allow the Director of Community Development to approve the removal of oak trees that are clearly dead and diseased beyond correction. In the draft resolution, there's an opportunity for the Planning Commission to kind of concur with the Director of Communities that's within the tree. So as I said, I was starting to get into kind of my final slides, and it feels a little bit cart before the horse, but the applicant will be walking us through all the details, the architectural elevations and site planning. But these are the conditions that are included in the draft resolution. All of the mitigation measures from a 2016 mitigated negative declaration created for the development of the area, mostly to the east, but also including these sites, are included as conditions of approval. The applicant will have to complete a lot merger before the lot line adjustment can be approved. As I said, each building will be subject to site plan review, DRC review of each building. some conditions about the siding of prototype building A. Decorative fencing will be required near the front of each lot. The landscaping, the site plans that are included in the draft resolution do include some reduced setbacks. However, the resolution is conditioned to provide 10 feet of landscape setback in the C3 zoned lots and 15 feet of landscape setback in the PM lots, which are the requirements for those respective zoning districts. The project is conditioned to dedicate some land for the tractor right-of-way, to make some lane striping and traffic signage changes, and then to consolidate driveways to avoid some circulation conflicts. The Planning Commission does have to make some findings to approve this project. The Planning Commission needs to find that the project is consistent with our planning documents, the general plan and the zoning ordinance, that the project accommodates the aesthetic quality of the city, and that it's compatible with the surrounding land uses. It also, because there is a lot line adjustment involved, it does need to be consistent with our subdivision ordinance. And then because there's an oak tree involved, you do need to find that that tree is diseased beyond correction. There is a CEQA document prepared for this project. There were a number of previous approvals for development of the site and the larger area along Wisteria and New Airport Road. Those were general plan amendment, a rezoning, a vesting tentative tract map, and an oak tree removal. They all with the from 2014. They were approved in 2016, and they did include a mitigated negative declaration for expected environmental impacts. This project is largely consistent with that original mitigated negative declaration. The city did prepare an addendum to address this project. An addendum is the appropriate CEQA document to use in this situation because there are no substantial changes or new or increased significant environmental effects due to the caused by the project. There are also no substantial changes to circumstances around the project, and there's no new information of substantial importance that was not previously known. And these are the reasons in the California Code that allow an addendum to be presented for a new project. The city did require 2 new studies, new technical studies, to justify the use of an addendum for this site. There was a new traffic study and then also an air quality and greenhouse gas emissions analysis. Those additional studies did not reveal that there would be any additional significant environmental effects, and so no new or modified mitigation measures have been included in the resolutions in front of you this evening. We did receive a public comment from a law firm. I believe all the planning commissioners have had an opportunity to look at that letter. The letter does request that an EIR be prepared for the project. The letter does not provide any substantive arguments that would justify the presence of the new significant and substantially more severe impacts. That's a quote from the letter. Staff's determination is that the addendum is sufficient environmental analysis for the project and does continue to recommend its approval. So the Planning Commission does have options, and again, this feels a little cart before the horse before you've seen the entire project that the applicant's going to present to you. But to approve the project, you would approve the 2 draft resolutions that are in front of you, one for that addendum to the mitigated negative declaration, and the other to approve the development plan and the lot line adjustment and oak tree removal. Of course, you can modify the project through amending those draft resolutions. If you need more information, you can send it back to staff, or you could deny the project by adopting findings of denial. That does conclude staff's report. Staff does recommend that the project be approved by approving those 2 resolutions. That actually concludes staff's report. As I said, the applicant does have a presentation of the project specifics. And so staff would recommend that we hear from the applicant at this point, but certainly if the Planning Commission has questions, we can address those as needed.
Thank you, Katie. If anybody has any burning questions for staff, we could field those, but otherwise I think we'll move into the presentation by the applicant. Is that okay? All right, let's do that. If you'd come to the podium and give us your name and firm name and address, we'd appreciate it.
Carol, can you hold on 1 second? I'm getting the presentation up.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair, members of the Planning Commission. I am Carol Florence. I'm the principal planner with Oasis Associates representing the applicant this evening. I have with me, I'm accompanied by the applicants, Britton Shuford and Nick Tompkins, as well as members of my design team, the project architect, as well as the project civil engineer. So Rebecca Newman, who is the project architect, and I will be tag teaming, if you will, on this presentation. And I believe that there's quite a bit to cover, but I first wanted to thank you for looking at all of the project materials and for your engagement this evening. And if you'll indulge me, before I get started, I would actually ask Mr. Shuford and Mr. Tompkins to say a few words to the commission.
Good evening, Planning Commissioners. My name is Britt Shuford, and I'm the co-founder and managing partner of PRG Investment and Management. As a firm, we have approximately 25 years of experience with industrial real estate. We are very excited about our Paso Commons development for 3 reasons. First, we believe the local Paso market can benefit from a new first-class business park. There has been very little new industrial development of scale built in the Central Coast for many years, and there is substantial tenant demand from both the wine industry and industrial companies. New companies coming to a business park can bring jobs, including well-compensated head of household positions. We are currently negotiating with 7 prospective tenants at Paso Commons, both from the wine industry and industrial sector. Some are currently based in Paso and focused on wine production, while others are in the industrial sector. Some are based in Paso and focused on wine production, and others are wine fulfillment, warehousing, shipping business, and they would be expanding into Paso. There is also good demand from non-wine industry tenants, such as manufacturers, industrial services firms, industrial headquarters, and the like. Some of the prospective tenants who are looking at Paso are actually looking throughout SLO County for a facility, and they're kind of gravitating to Paso because it's where a new industrial facility can be found at Paso Commons. Second, I am personally very passionate about Paso and appreciate the time we spend here. We have a home in Cambria, and I enjoy spending quite a bit of time in Paso with our family. The City of Paso Robles staff at every level has been amazing to work with, and your pro-jobs and commerce approach is refreshing. We believe that the city's insightful decision-making is a competitive advantage and will be very important to attracting new companies and excellent jobs. Third, we are excited to partner with Nick Tompkins. Given our friendship, his excellent track record of build-to-suit development and standing in Paso and throughout the Central Coast community, we look forward to collaborating with him on this project. In closing, our team has worked very hard on the Paso Commons project to date, and we definitely have a lot of work ahead, which we're excited about. We thank you for the opportunity, and I'll hand it over to Nick.
Thank you very much for allowing us to be here tonight and hearing about our project. And as a lifetime Central Coast resident and 45 years actually in San Luis Obispo County, before that I was in a little cow town called Casmalia by a toxic waste dump. But I've been located in the Central Coast my whole life, spending my professional life in agriculture and real estate. We really are looking forward to working with PRG, Paso Robles, and to develop the Paso Commons. When we started talking with Britt about this, one of the things that became clear and a little bit surprising to me, even though we're here and we've been involved in it, is that San Luis County really does not have a project like this. And I believe the last project that was similar to this was called East Airport in San Luis Obispo, which Carol helped us with, and it was about a 45 or 50 acre industrial project. And once we kind of got into that and got our hands around it, it actually filled itself up really quickly, and because there was a pent-up demand, and rather than doing one project here and one project there, and as far as a master plan community, there was clearly a need there. But there is nothing like that. And what we found is that as Britt has been actively working, talking to many of these tenants, there is a surprising need, and especially for some of these people who have rapid growth within their companies, that they can't see far enough out in the horizon to maybe be able to go out and say, I'm going to take a year and a half or 2 years to plan a deal, get the construction documents over 6 months, build it over 12, and in 3.5 years, I'll be there. So what we're hoping to be able to do is to do all that front-loaded work and then be able to come in and build these buildings for them so they can meet the needs for their companies. And some of them are interesting, not some of them, they're all interesting, but some of them have some really interesting job creation opportunities that we'll be glad to be a part of. As one of the gatekeepers, I would say, for this project is managing the inflationary pressures that everybody is feeling today, and no matter what business you're in, but it is certainly impacting construction and real estate, development costs. And so managing that and doing everything we can to mitigate that, along with helping to mitigate some of our tenants' expenses, will be critical in terms of timeline and absorption of the project. We really plan on meeting the existing and exciting need, and thank you for your time. Thank you.
Thank you, gentlemen. I appreciate that, and thank you for your indulgence. I think it's important that you know who's investing and developing in your community. So moving right along, hopefully. Slow. Okay. So I just wanted to start with our approach to the project, and it was really based on designing a vocabulary, if you will, for the site and the building architecture and the landscape architecture. And in doing so, setting these standards, so as Katie mentioned, we will be coming back to the DRC with individual projects for them to review based on the design standards that hopefully Planning Commission will be reviewing this evening, and obviously before issuance of the building permits. So with that said, I would respectfully request that the Planning Commission approve Resolution A, approving the addendum to the previous MND based upon the applicable mitigation measures, as well as draft Resolution B for PD 12-13 PRAL 21-005 and OTR 21-24, subject to findings and the 29 site-specific and the 33 standard conditions of approval. Oh, so we're going to, okay, sorry. Thank you. By now you're somewhat familiar with this graphic that projects the site in the context of the neighborhood. Again, Wisteria Lane on the northern property, Tractor Street. On the bottom, as you can see, the one valley oak that will be removed, and there will be 11 replacement oak trees required for that removal. Katie mentioned that Tractor Way will push through, Wisteria will come through and become essentially what everyone is considering the 46 West parallel route or the new airport road. So all of this will be contributing to the traffic impact fees to move those kinds of improvements forward, which I think is important. I'll take next slide. Oh. Thank you. From a historical context, these parcels were created circa 1998, 2006, 2016 via the various tract maps and the rezone that was under track 3069. So the compliance isn't only required based on these entitlements, but also the mitigation measures associated with them, as well as the standards that are part of the planned industrial, as well as the commercial light industrial zoning district. So there are a lot of regulations that we must comply with, and I think that we've really done a great job attempting to do that, and we look forward to coming back to the DRC, if you will, building by building. And I suppose the only reason I shine a light on the historical aspects is to underscore that development can consume a rather inordinate amount of time, from the first glimmer in someone's eyes to plan for it to actual fruition. As you can imagine, and as my clients commented, it's subject to the vagaries of the process, the economy, and a myriad of other influences. So I hope that the wait, which is about 24 years here, is well worth it for the city. So focusing on the project, we're proposing, again, Paso Commons as a first-class business park to provide flexible industrial warehouse space for a variety of uses. The allowable uses in the PM and the C3 zone actually provide some great opportunities for the types of businesses that Mr. Schufert and Mr. Tompkins alluded to. So in developing the project, the design team also focused on creating a project that would complement the existing businesses along Wisteria Lane while continuing to set a high standard for design. This next slide is a street scene along Wisteria. You can see the arrows and they coincide with the elevations. Again, the project is 7 individual buildings on 7 parcels created by 2 lot mergers and the lot line adjustment. So to provide maximum flexibility, the lots range in size from about 1.5 acre to just shy of 6 acres, and the building square footages range from about 21,000 upwards of 124,000. So in March, the DRC reviewed the project. And you will note, again, these 6 areas, and I'll just go through those quickly for you. So this next slide depicts the vehicular and pedestrian circulation. There is an existing sidewalk on the south side of Wisteria Lane, so we will be planting the parkway and planting the setbacks between the back of sidewalk and the building. We will be adding a new sidewalk, as you can see to the right, as well as vehicular access connecting Wisteria Lane down to Tractor Street. And you'll notice that the southeast driveway there on Tractor will be a right in, right out. As you can see, it kind of comes into the curvature of that extension, so it wouldn't be appropriate to have left in and left out. There will be identifiable access points at the entries of the buildings, and we'll also be complying with the Cal Green standards for additional on-site bike parking and storage. And in addition, we will be striping, and I had to think about this, striping both Wisteria Lane and Golden Hill between Wisteria and Tractor for Class 2 bike lanes, which we think is great. So the fencing has been modified. This was the existing fencing plan, and as if you've read the condition, next slide, we will be extending the decorative metal fencing, and so the powder-coated chain link fencing will only occur at the rear of the lots behind buildings 1, 2, 3, and 4. It's a lot on this slide, and I apologize for that, but the Muni Code requires that the parking lot be shaded by 25% with shade trees. So not only based on the city's climate action plan, but the condition of approval, which is actually an air quality and greenhouse gas mitigation measure, we will be increasing that to 50%, which I think is very doable and really will help to reduce evaporative emissions from parked cars. So I'll just have you focus on that site section through Wisteria because it will come up again in the latter part of my presentation. So given the nature of this type of potential building use, we've accommodated truck docks. And while they may be located currently outside of the public view, the DRC requested that we screen these. So you'll see this next slide. We will be adding a screen wall that will match the architecture, adding evergreen trees and shrubs and putting vines on that wall. So that wall probably will be, I would say, a minimum of 6 and probably more, like 8 feet tall to create that screening. The buildings have rather expansive roofs, so in addition to the parapet, we have the opportunity to place the HVAC units so that they're out of the public's line of sight. And we'll be coming in with our construction documents again to show that we can accomplish that. The project's also designed to be solar ready, and so there will be additional photovoltaic panels on the roof, which there's ample opportunity to accomplish both the HVAC units and the PV panels. This final DRC comment had to do with, you can see the upper left-hand corner of that white corrugated metal siding, which just was not resonating with them. So we have modified that to the lower building elevation. So it now is gray corrugated metal, and you can see it now also has that ribbon of glazing. So with the Planning Commission's approval this evening, I just wanted to walk through the next step, obviously securing tenants, which I'm very happy to hear that there are 7 potential tenants in the wings. We'll start our construction documents, site architecture, mechanical, plumbing, electrical, et cetera. Go ahead and lodge the building permit applications, and at the same time appear before the DRC, because we want to make certain that the design standards that we created will comport with the proposed buildings moving forward. We'll go through city plan check. They'll be checking our mitigation measures in compliance with the conditions of approval, building permit issuance, and construction. And when I look at 1 through 7, it seems like, oh, snap your fingers and there we are. But we've been working on this for a while, and we continue to look forward to working with the city on this project. At this juncture, I would like to turn the presentation over to Rebecca Newman, who's with Eris Architects. She's going to walk you through the prototypical building A and B and those design details that you'll be able to compare and contrast when we get back to the DRC, and then I'll come back and close. Thank you.
Okay, great. So it's just this part. Okay. Perfect. Good evening. As Carol mentioned, I'm Rebecca Newman. I'm with Eris Studio Architects, and I'm very happy to present our project to you this evening. In the next few slides, I'd like to just walk you through our 2 design prototypes, their unifying design features, and those that differentiate them to create a cohesive first-class campus. On the current slide before you, we're seeing an overall site plan, which we've earmarked certain buildings with certain prototypes. However, as you'll see in the following slides, the design features allow the prototypes to be used interchangeably and still maintain a cohesive campus. This is prototype A. It is a pre-engineered metal building, and some of the unifying features that we'll go through here on this slide and then future on prototype B include the large, expansive glass corners, really inviting. They identify the entries, as well as the warm Corten siding as an accent material. Prototype A, some of the distinguished features, or sorry, some of the things that differentiate them from prototype B include the horizontal clerestory windows, as well as the rich gray corrugated siding. The building faces of these pre-engineered metal buildings do have recesses. They pop in, they pop out, and this actually provides opportunity at the base for landscaping. And these prototypes also incorporate amenity spaces for both patrons and employees. We have developed a 4-sided architecture, and so some of these details that we'll go into a little bit more depth here in the next slide do go around all 4 sides of the building. So here we dive a little bit deeper into these design features. So on the right, we have sort of those unifying features, the large glass entry corner with the Corten siding. We've incorporated details which make those recesses and provide a little bit of depth along the facade, so it's not just a blank wall. And then the left here we've worked with DRC, and we are really thankful for their comments, as Carol mentioned, about changing the white corrugated to more of the same rich gray. And what happens here, or what can happen here on the left side, is these buildings offer flexibility for multiple tenants. So this building could be divided. And on the left side, as an option there on the lower left, you can see we could put in storefront as well. This is our materials board for prototype A, just more of an in-depth look at some of the materials, an example of the storefront glazing, the warm Core-10 accent material, gray corrugated siding, and then we've also included these same materials in our campus signage. So for buildings 2, 3, and 4, at this time we've anticipated prototype B, but again, you'll see that the design features really allow these to be interchanged. So prototype B is a concrete tilt-up building, and we've got the same glass corners with warm Core-10 material. However, separate and different from prototype A, we've actually, in order to kind of lighten the mass of these concrete tilt-up buildings, which are naturally just feel a little bit heavier, we've finished them with a lighter material. And these concrete tilt-ups are set back a significant distance from wisteria, 15 feet in some areas, but even as much as 40 and higher. Again, four-sided architecture. We've got these details that go around the sides of the building. So looking at some of these details, similar to prototype A and prototype B, again, we have these large, open, inviting corners with glazing. We've added the Core-10 material and included detailing to break up the facades, such as concrete reveals and recessed vertical windows. And lastly, the color and material board for prototype B. Again, the same unifying materials with the Core-10 siding, large glass windows, and of course the paint colors for the lighter feel of these masses. And I'll hand it back to you.
Thank you, Rebecca. In addition to the design standards for the prototypical buildings A and B, the landscape architecture design will follow the noted objectives that you see before you. So cohesive planting for the campus, accenting the entries, tree shading, as I mentioned, we will have quite a bit of that in the parking lots and patios. Screening of those things that are kind of back of house, if you will. And you've seen the type of fencing that we will have around each building. This next slide, sorry, I'm spoiled now, I don't touch anything. This next slide is actually the proposed plant list for the development and focuses on the cross-section that you saw earlier in the presentation along Wisteria Lane. So there's a parkway sidewalk and then a 15-foot wide landscape planter. So it's really layering that plant material in the setback area, choosing the right plant material to create that layer, and finally making certain that both the street trees and the on-site trees are appropriate and will grow and flourish in that particular area. So the construction documents will actually be presented to the DRC, and that will capture this whole concept in much more detail, and including the irrigation design at that juncture. So I'm just going to quickly go through these slides. You can see there's a small arrow there showing you where you're looking. And again, this is looking down Germain Way between building 1 and 2. This is the smaller buildings between building 5 and 7 and back toward building 6. This next slide is actually, as you can see where the arrow is, there will be a road again that connects Wisteria to Tractor. Again, we're on Wisteria. You can see IQMS on the left and our building 3 on the right. Farther down we go, Wisteria, Justin on your left, and our building 5 on the right. So in closing, tonight, dear planning commissioners, we believe that the addition of the Paso Commons project will enhance and strengthen the city's economic health and support the city's express development strategies that I'm sure you're all familiar with, but include retention and expansion of businesses, workforce development, and job creation that will result in the diversification of the city's economy. So in closing, I want to thank you very much for your time this evening, for your considerate deliberation, and hopefully your approval of the project. The applicant and design team are here to address any of your comments or questions before the public hearing is closed. Thank you.
Thank you. I'd like to compliment both staff and the consulting group for the presentations you just gave us, very thorough and to the point. The next portion of our discussion moves into a series of questions that commissioners might have, I think in this case for both staff and or the applicant's representative and the applicants themselves. So we will do that. We kind of do that in marching order, and I'll start to my right tonight with Commissioner Christensen. Do you have questions you'd like to pose?
I believe I was on DRC for this, so I'm pretty up to speed on it. And bear with me, I'm working off my phone because my tablet's not working. I'm experimenting like they wanted us to do electronically, mainly because my binder was old. So I did all my homework at my office on my computer, so I have it here. But anyway, I apologize. So bear with me. I only have a couple questions for staff. One, I just thought I would ask Isaac if you have any comments on the addendum and the letter attached to the addendum that you might enlighten us a little bit on your thoughts on that.
Sure, Commissioner Christensen. So we do have special counsel from our office, from the city attorney's office, Sarah, who's available, who worked closely on the project with respect to the addenda and can speak to that. And then with respect to the other addendum that was added, our office has been in touch with staff regarding the process and next steps associated with the project approvals.
Okay, thank you. Did you say Sarah was willing to comment on that? She's with us?
I'm here. Yes, I'm here.
Okay. So just a brief question. Obviously, it looks like this addendum, according to staff, is there doesn't seem to be an issue. Is that correct? I just want to get a confirmation from that, from the legal point of view.
Correct. The city has an adopted 2016 mitigated negative declaration and has conducted the analysis required under CEQA and the CEQA guidelines to determine whether the project proposed today would result in any new significant or more substantially severe impacts. Based on the substantial evidence that the city's reviewed, the traffic study, the air quality study, et cetera, the city staff concluded that substantial evidence supported their finding to proceed by an addendum to the 2016 MND rather than prepare any subsequent environmental analysis. And that is the process provided for in the California Environmental Quality Act. All the studies are here, and staff's determination is supported by substantial evidence.
Okay, thank you. And thank you for the clarification. Were they required to go back and do the 2 additional follow-up studies? Was that a requirement of it? Can you clarify that for me? I believe it was traffic and what was it, the second?
Air quality.
Air quality?
I think CEQA does not provide any express requirements for what is included in an addendum to either a mitigated negative declaration or an EIR. But by preparing those studies, it provided a significant and high level of detail that the city could look to determine whether or not there were any substantial changes, significant new impacts.
Great. Now, I appreciate that. And I thank you the clarification. You can explain that a lot better and then I could probably understand it. That's the only other question I have from legal, so I appreciate that. I did have one question for staff, and maybe it's, I'm not sure if it's Mr. Athey. If, this is a small question, the landscaping along the parkway that's on the sidewalk, is that part of a landscape lighting district, or who's set to maintain that portion of it? Or who does it now? Do you know? I mean, it looks wonderful, and I think it's going to be beautiful to the project. I'm just curious how we're having that managed for further maintenance.
I don't know.
I didn't mean it to be a trick question. I apologize.
No, it's okay. I just don't know the answer to that question.
Okay. Maybe we'll try and look that up. Okay, that's all my questions for right now. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Commissioner Christensen.
This is Darren. This is Darren, Commissioner Christensen, City Planner. I have a little more history on this subdivision. I think as these properties developed in this business park, it's been the practice that the parkways get planted at the time each property is developed. So specific landscaping and lighting districts have not been set up for these areas within the Golden Hills Development Park here. So the intent would be that, and these landscape plans show how those parkways would be planted. So the intent is for irrigation and maintenance to be cared for for each project as they get developed. So at this time, for instance, Justin Winery across the street, they planted and they maintain and water their parkway area, as well as the other developments along Wisteria there.
Okay, so essentially what we're saying is per development, then it's addressed at that time, but there's not really an overall plan for that area. So would that be a requirement as part of this project moving forward, is that they're going to be responsible for maintaining that landscaping?
That's correct. There's not a landscape and lighting district that maintains the whole Wisteria Lane area. The development would be responsible for the irrigation and maintenance of the landscaping and the parkways.
Okay, thanks for that, Darren. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Commissioner Christensen, and we are impressed by your new electronic acumen, by the way. Yep, there you go. So we'll go from state-of-the-art to less than state-of-the-art with Commissioner Gibson and his sticky notes.
Sticky notes work.
He might be smarter, too.
Yeah. So I have a question on for you, David, on page 15, because it invokes your title. It says on the future tractorway extension, the city engineer will provide a condition that prior to the improvement and/or the grading plan final, that a dedicated right-of-way of tractor road will be granted. So I'm just questioning the and/or, and prior to the timing of the improvement and the grading plan final. And just to pile on, I'd like to maybe ask if you could educate at least myself as to what the expected timing is for all that to take place, because I'm questioning the and/or, and it would seem like even for the benefit of the applicant that they would want to know what was going to be taken away or used so they even knew what they could do with that site.
David Athey, City Engineer, Commissioner Gibson. So the and/or really refers to how they propose to develop the site. So they could do a grading plan, then come in with their improvement plans, like for their buildings. So if they come in with a grading plan first, it would require the dedication with that. If they come in with the improvement plans with the grading within the improvement plans, we would get the dedication at that time. So it's just really how it's worded. We're going to get the dedication with the improvement of the lots when they come in for basically grading any kind of permits to construct their improvements.
Okay. Yeah, so could you give us some sort of a timeline of what that would be? And then also let us know, if that actually is going to be extended, where we are in the process of that extension taking place, even without that development.
Certainly. So we're currently working on that right now. So that's all part of the Union Road
another
overpass. PAED. Property acquisition is a ongoing process with that. What's shown on the screen right here is just a small portion of the right-of-way we need for the whole interchange.
Right.
We're currently talking to some of the landowners in this area about their parcels and looking at, appraisals, things like that. Now the interchange, there you go. There's a better drawing here. It kind of shows the areas. The area in purple, the big splotches, those are areas that will be required for the half cloverleaf interchange. Tractorway, you can see it there. It's underlying that yellow line, but there's some right of way in that location. You can see the bend in the road where it touches the applicant's property. So eventually, to make this plan work, we need to get right of way in basically all those purple areas. And we've currently are working with the applicants to the north, that big white splotch that's up there on a 100-foot right of way all the way to Airport Road, over the bluff and down for the Warrow Creek Bridge and all that. We are potentially a week away from getting that right of way as part of that first phase of the map that's coming in. In terms of Tractorway, we're actually just having discussions with the landowners that are out there at this point. And that's ongoing. In terms of will it be 5 years, will it be 7 years, will it be 15 years? It could be all of those. It could be 25, 30, 50. We're pushing as hard as we can. We're trying to get to what we call shovel ready so that the plans for the entire interchange and all that are completed and ready to go. And so we can chase grants and other funding. Because a lot of this work is beyond the means of the city without bonds or some other type of financial financial financing. So I don't know if I answered all your questions, but it's ongoing and we're working on it. And we pick up pieces as we go. These have been our strategy.
Yeah, I think you answered probably as best as could be answered. What I'm hearing is that if the applicant has some vagaries too, that whole part of that might not happen until something happens more concrete on our end.
Yeah, we are, and a lot of it depends on landowners to the south, what their plans are and what they want to do, and we still have to negotiate with them on that. They have their own wants and needs, so as those go along, we work with people to acquire the right of way.
All right, thank you.
Yeah, you bet.
Okay, my next question is in the as part of this, as was indicated, there was a transportation impact study, and I'm just looking at the executive summary. I mean, I read the whole thing, but I took notes of the executive summary on page 49, and I found the illustration on page 61 to be extremely helpful with their recommendations. And then I was then taking that and trying to find where those recommendations were in the actual resolution, and I just couldn't find them. The only ones that I could find were things like the bikeways, but in terms of the realignment of the driveways and the ingresses and egresses, I'm not finding those at all. So could you please help me, let me know where are we recommending that we're going to follow those recommendations? If so, where would we find those? Oh, you.
I'm find them too. What page does the conditions of approval start on? Pardon me, I didn't have that flagged. Site specific.
Site conditions, one started 179.
Yeah, so page 181 at the bottom has the engineering division conditions. So that includes the driveways as condition 5 under engineering division conditions on page 182 at the end. And that talks about locating the driveways in conformance with figure 3 in the TIS.
Okay, just bear with me, David. So you're saying it in conformance with TIS figure 3, is that what we're showing on?
So
Is that page 61?
61, correct.
Okay, all right, perfect. Okay, thank you.
Yes, you bet.
All right. On page 195, I just want to confirm that one of my question on the fencing got answered, because what was proposed in here and then what was provided tonight was changed, and I'm satisfied with that. But I just this question for staff: the building uses that they're indicated, because everything's predicated on these being either a warehouse or wine production. Is that pretty much the limitation of what all these buildings are going to be able to be used? Any tenants would be either a warehouse or wine production?
Darren, do you want to jump in?
This is Darren. Yeah, this is Darren Nash, City Planner. So those uses are what this master development plan with this applicant is indicating they're intending with these uses. And as the applicant team indicated, they're working on tenants for these currently for those types of uses. However, in the future, if there was a change of use, or one of these buildings was built for something different than this, we would be looking at the corresponding zoning, the planned industrial zone, or if it's on the lots that are the C3 zone, and taking a look at uses that are permitted in those zones. There are other manufacturing type uses that could be allowed other than wine related. So there's a variety of uses that could be here based on the zoning. But we'd also have to take a look at how these properties are parked and make sure that it complies with the parking ordinance. But it is possible that other uses beyond just the wine related uses could go in these buildings, but they would have to comply with the zoning code and the uses permitted use table, as well as comply with parking and other building related tenant improvement plans as well.
So Darren, just to clarify, because my understanding is we're being asked to approve this plan under the context that it is warehouse and wine production, and then it's showing that there's adequacy and compliance with the various ordinances such as parking and other requirements. If for some reason the building use was not a warehouse or wine production, would that come back to the Planning Commission?
If it's a permitted use and if the parking complies with what's being shown, I think it could be handled with a site plan review at a DRC level. If it was something that needed a conditional use permit, or was something that was not compliant with this master development plan that you're seeing here, then it could come back to the Planning Commission for an amendment.
Okay, so that would be a decision on the part of staff as to who would come back to?
Again, Commissioner Gibson, it really comes down to the use. Is it permitted in the zone? And does the site planning that either has already been established, if it's a change of use in an existing building, or at the time of that site plan review process through the DRC, we would need to take a look at the use and make sure it's compatible with the site planning and the development plan that's shown here in these exhibits. But we would need to take a look at it, and staff would then determine, is this a DRC site plan review, or is it something that is different and need to go up to the Planning Commission?
All right. Okay, next question, moving on page 197, talks about, and it was briefly discussed, about the conditions of approval mitigation measures. There's a transportation impact fees and utility services. And it does a cross-reference of a tract amendment resolution, or actually two different tract amendment resolutions, but I didn't see those contained in here. So are those a document that has been approved that just has an overlay for that particular area, or could somebody shed some light on what those two resolutions are?
Be happy to. So those were the identified as the in the presentation where it talked about the previous environmental documents that were prepared for the previous track maps. So track 2269 as well as track 2778. So those were established mitigation measures with those subdivisions at that time that this project would need to comply with as well. And if you look at page 179 on the site-specific conditions, condition number 4 indicates that when we're reviewing these projects at the building permit stage, at the site plan review stage, that they verify that they've complied with all of the different mitigation measures outlined here on this sheet 197 to make sure that all those have been complied with.
Okay, so just to clarify, Darren, that you're confirming that as part of the previous action on these areas, that there's at some point these resolutions were passed, and that whether it's this applicant or anyone else, there's already an existing agreement that they would pay a pro rata share for transportation impact fees and a pro rata share for utility services. Is that correct?
That's correct. Each development of each properties would need to comply with those listed conditions of approval. Some of them have been already complied with, such as the Kit Fox mitigation fees. Those were paid with the developer of the subdivision back when these lots were recorded. There were some oak trees previously that have already been handled. So some of these have already been checked off, but the condition that number 4 on 179 indicates that we will make sure that all of these will be complied with as these properties get developed as well.
All right, thank you. That's all my questions for now.
Thank you. Mr. Covarrubias.
Thank you. I want to start with the buildings themselves. It was indicated that there are potentially 7 applicants right now. My question, I guess, maybe to the design team or a member of the design team is, are these buildings being built to suit for these tenants?
Yes, Commissioner, they are built to suit.
They are built to suit.
Yes. So we have, I would say, a fair amount of control.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so of the 7 applicants, are you able to divulge how many are winery industry and how many are not?
I would have to leave that to the applicant if you'd like to address that. But I think at this juncture, that general consensus is that some are wine related and some are more industrial related, without divulging names. I know everyone's curious about that, but we're unable to do that at this juncture.
Another question is, I noticed that the 2 main buildings, the larger buildings, obviously have a special unique feature as far as the size. So you're catering to, I would think, kind of a specific type of industry or business.
I would say that those buildings that are about 124,000 square feet can be a little more specific to the wine industry for storage, distribution, et cetera, especially in this particular area.
Okay, so the loading docks, just to be clear, there are loading docks in building 3 and 4. Also, I saw one in 1 and 2, but I don't see any in 5, 6, or 7. Is that kind of the general plan, if I'm understanding?
There are, but they're probably not obvious. The ones that on the smaller buildings, 5, 6, and 7, are kind of tucked in there. But when I showed you the before and after of the screening of those were actually the smaller buildings.
Okay.
Yeah.
So back to the larger buildings then, if the applicant requires a much larger loading area or dock, is that something, how does the staff plan to deal with something, that kind of a change? I mean, I don't know what's being proposed as far as the size now, but let's say a large wine industry customer comes in, tenant says, I need instead of 1 loading bay, I need 5 loading bays.
I'll just say from our perspective, when we go back to DRC and when we're working with staff, there would be a substantial conformance determination, whether or not the building that we're bringing forward for actually a building permit conforms with what the approval is, hopefully this evening.
Okay.
And if there was something not substantially in conformance, we probably would be back here.
Right. So that's my next question for clarity then is if the project is approved tonight, understanding that the buildings themselves individually are going back to DRC, that's where it stops. So if DRC approves it, it does not come back to commission, correct?
Correct.
Okay. Next question is regarding parking. How is the parking going to be structured in these? Is it based on square footage of the building? Is it a combination of square footage of the building and the tenant? How is that being proposed?
I'm pausing to see if Darren will jump in. So parking is determined by, it's a square footage. So depending on the use and then the area. So warehousing has a specific number of parking spaces per square foot, as does a manufacturing use. And so depending on the tenant, depending on how many square feet they have, that would be how we calculate the parking requirement.
Okay, so is the plan then, just so I'm understanding, is let's, for example, building 1, the tenant has been identified. At that time, the renderings of the final building will be made, which will outline the parking and any other features of building 1 and so forth, and then going forward, building 2 and so forth. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay, all right, perfect. Darren, I know that there's no landscaping or lighting district for this area. Does that also encompass the parking lot and the pedestrian walkways? I didn't see anything with regard to lighting in any of this.
The project proposes lighting for each individual lot for the dock areas, for the parking lot areas, but those are installed and maintained privately for each parcel. But I believe there is some lighting details, but those are the kind of more specific we'll get into when the site plan review comes back to the DRC. But there is lighting proposed in the loading dock areas, the parking areas shown on the plans.
Okay, thank you for that. My next question is back to the comment letter that was received, Isaac or Sarah. In the letter, last sentence on paragraph 2, it's very specific as to what their finding is. My question is, do we respond? Is it, if this project is approved, do we respond to a letter of this type, just given the nature of where it came from and who it came from?
Sure. Well, there's two different answers. One, I can say that under the California Environmental Quality Act, addenda like this are not required to be circulated for public comment. So you're also not obliged, as you would be if it were an EIR, to prepare a written response to this comment. So legally, no, you are in no way obligated to respond to this letter, presuming you even could, because it doesn't actually articulate anything other than a conclusion. So legally, no, you were not obligated to respond to it.
Okay.
Assuming for the moment that it included additional information or additional explanation of the author's position, you might consider whether or not to respond to it. But in the setting aside the law, in the actuality of the letter, there's nothing to respond to. We can advise that you have before you a legally appropriate document in terms of a document supported by substantial evidence explaining why an addendum to the 2016 MND is appropriate. And I'm not certain what you could even say in response to this letter.
Okay. Okay, thank you for that.
I'm happy to answer any other questions you have, but absent their assertion that it should not have been an addendum because they think there may be impacts, they don't really say, well, no, they don't. It's not that they don't really say, they don't say at all why.
Right, right. No, I agree with that. But I was just curious only, again, given the nature of the letter and who it was from.
Sure. Well,
yeah.
it is from a law firm, and implies legal action. But if they truly have a dispute, they have a remedy within the city's administrative remedy process.
Okay. Okay, I'm satisfied with that answer. Thank you very much. Last comment, more of a comment. I want to thank the staff and the design team. Presentation was well done. Thank you. No more questions.
Commissioner Jorgensen.
Thank you. Some of my questions have already been addressed, so really I just have one area. And Mr. Athey, if you could come back up. You're very, very popular tonight. In front of Building 3 in Wisteria is what I assume is the existing cul-de-sac turnaround that would then be extended. And it's shown that widening right there would remain a perpetuity, I assume. Is that accurate, or is there potential to bring that back in and just make the street edge, the curb and gutter consistent? What's the plan there?
So we noodled on that for a little while. Joe, David Athey, city engineer, sorry, I introduced myself for the audience out there. We noodled on that for quite a bit of time. Do we just have them straighten that out, get rid of that old cul-de-sac, leave it there? I finally settled on leaving it there for potential for traffic calming in the future. So, in looking at that, this project is required to restripe this bike lane, center turn lane. Naturally, we're going to have a lot of trucks on this road in the future. And eliminating the parking. I just don't know in the future how traffic is going to respond once the Wero Bridge is in, and that ends up being the main thoroughfare up to Golden Hill Road from the airport area. So I decided to leave it there, maybe a future traffic circle in this location to get people to slow down, what we typically call a chicane, getting people to move their directions, move their car, and so it causes them some distress and from the fact that there's a change in the roadway coming up. So that's really the reason why we decided to keep it. And then the other reason is it was going to be on the other side, and there was no plan to remove it from the development across the street. So.
Okay, thank you.
You bet.
That makes sense. Really, the reason for my question is that first of all, I really like this project. The quality is great. The opportunity is spectacular for the city. The only area that I keep coming back to and I can't get past is the adjacency of buildings 3 and 4 to the street and the setback. And as I recall in the presentation, it showed that that setback ranges from 43 feet, which I'm guessing is probably right opposite the office, the northwest corner of building 3. That looks like the furthest distance back, to 15, and that I believe was shown and makes sense to be right at this area we're talking about where the existing cul-de-sac is. And when I was out there today and looking at the buildings along with the existing buildings along Wisteria, their height and setback, trying to visualize the height and setback of these buildings for context with the existing context of those other buildings. And in looking at this aerial, the Justin buildings are some of that structure comes very, very close to Wisteria, but it's stepped back. This is really close to Wisteria, and it's not stepped back. And I was not on DRC when this was presented, but one of the comments, as I read it, was to have some variation along that frontage and not just solid. And I like very much the design as presented, so I'm not questioning that, but it's solid. It's a solid flat wall. So I'm disturbed there. And I guess my question for the applicant, if you happen to know, what is the height of building 3 and 4? What is the proposed height in comparison to the other buildings along the other side of Wisteria? And what approximately is their setback? I know it varies. That's a hard question, but give me some numbers to put this all in context.
Certainly. My name is Rebecca Newman. I'm with Air Studio Architects. The buildings 3 and 4, their heights are 38 feet to the highest level of the parapet. And actually, excuse me, it's 36 feet. And in one of the renderings that we provided, it is a little misleading because they do appear, just for the perspective, a little bit closer to the street in that particular photo simulation. So the majority of the building, as described in that frontage diagram, is around 30 to 40 feet from the back of sidewalk. On the other side, just across from Wisteria, that is the IQMS, or previously IQMS building, which is also a very tall structure. I don't know the height offhand, but I would think that it's very similar. And the placement of buildings 3 and 4 and their mass really kind of mimic what's being shown on the other side of the street. And then as you go further down Wisteria, we have the smaller buildings which respect the mass of the existing Justin Winery. So I don't know if that's helpful or not.
No, I appreciate that. Thank you. Well, I guess at this point, I'm just going to say I'm uncomfortable, particularly building 3, because building 4, the mass changes, it has an angle to it. I'm uncomfortable with how close that is and how flat that is to Wisteria. Other than that, I don't have any other questions.
Thank you. I have just a couple. I was on DRC and I've had the benefit of my fellow commissioners and the queries that they've put forward. There's a number of green initiatives that are cited here as a part of this project. There's no reference to transit. Do we have any transit potential extensions in the future that could serve this?
Darren, are you aware of any, or actually David Athey? You're in the room.
David Athey, city engineer. So no, there's no current transit service to this location. Once, as you see here on the map on the screen, number 1 is indicated up there on the screen. That's the new bridge, roundabout on Wirral Creek Bridge. There really wouldn't be a need for transit in this zone until that connection is made in the future. And I've had extensive conversations with the RTA, Regional Transit Authority in our area, regarding how you establish new bus stops and new routes. And it's really based on a needs analysis that they conduct after you develop land. So it's not this more residential, but the areas east of town that were just recently approved for over 2,000 units. They wouldn't commit to increasing bus stops or changing routes until that's developed and until they figure out like where the actual need is, because they're really specific about where they put their dollars for transit. So in the future, there could be a stop here, Golden Hill, going down out Wisteria, out New Airport Road to the airport. That could be a possibility in the future. It makes sense going out to the airport if there's some kind of use or job center out there. But at this point, there's no requirement for transit, and that actually may be a good use for that little old cul-de-sac, a future bus stop in that location. So,
okay, stay put for a minute.
Okay,
because I do have one question on the transportation impact study. In looking at the impacts on some of the intersections, I was focused on 46 East Golden Hill Road, the movement south on Golden Hill to turn east onto 46. level of service D, both project plus, so it still works, I guess, in that context. Having sat there any number of times, probably more so than the other intersection, that one is really stacked up now in those two turn lanes that are there. And vehicle counts are one thing, but for some reason, and maybe it's the fuel stations there, a lot of vehicles have fifth wheel trailers that take up huge lane capacity there. And I'm just curious, is there any movement there or any possibility there of any improvements to increase that turn lane capacity as a part of this or in the future?
I don't think for the southbound left, so for everybody that's
double left.
That's the double left turn going eastbound on 46. I don't believe there's enough room because of the left turn lane, that double left that's into the shopping center. I don't think there's any opportunity to extend that left turn pocket any additional length. I think, we're working with Central Coast Transportation Consulting, and I think the improvements that we can eke out of that signal are going to be operational improvements to the signal itself, and to the other legs to try to get them to work more efficiently rather than increasing that left turn pocket. So we're signal operations runs a lot on delay, what they call delay, how long we sit at the signal. So that if we can shorten the delay at other legs of the signal, that frees up time for the left turn pocket so we can move those people out and get them going leftbound. So as part of other developments that are going on nearby, the landing and down on Airport Road, Boys School project, we'll get to that point where that will be conditioned, because this project doesn't trip any warrants for the signal or any kind of conditions out there. But as those bigger projects come in and the queues really increase, then that's when we'll look at enhancing that, working with Caltrans to enhance that signal.
Thank you.
Yep.
And the only other question I had is there were statements that for each of the 7 buildings, essentially they would be providing parking on site related to that specific building and those uses. Building 6 that's on the graphic now with Tractor Way that comes and slices off a piece of that, does that still hold true for Building 6 as well?
So I'll let Darren jump in if he wants to, but if you look just to the north of Building 6, there's actually 2 rows of parking there. To the north, I think that orange line, you can just barely see it above my big green blob, or below the big green blob. So 2 rows of parking just to the north of Building 6, and then that 1 row below. So there is, it's not just what's below the building. Hopefully that helps.
Great, thank you. That's all I had for questions. Any other commissioners? Yes, Mr. Christensen.
I have one follow-up question. I went back in my little notes here and I realized I missed something. Hey, Darren, I was just wondering if you could clarify, or maybe someone else on staff, but I've read it over and over and I was really confused by it. So I was hoping maybe explaining as part of the lot line adjustment findings, number 14 and 15 on page 176. I'm confused only because I read 14 and then I read 15 and I'm not sure, but they seem to contradict each other. So maybe just a little clarification on that for the lot size minimums and how we get to that point.
Sure, let me turn to the language here. Yeah, those are findings that come from the subdivision ordinance related to lot line adjustments, and the intent is that we verify that they're meeting the minimum lot size per the zone. So I understand the confusion there, but basically what 14 is saying is that because of there's 2 zones, these buildings go over the PM zone, and then further to the east, there is the C3 zone. So that's why it talks about a 10,000 square foot minimum, which is the PM zone, and a 5,000 square foot minimum, which is the C3. All these lots are over the 10,000 is what 14 is saying. And then again in 15, there's a separate section in the subdivision ordinance, talks about lots no less than 5,000 square feet and 80-foot depth. Just a different section that has a different parameter on the minimum lot size. So both of those are indicating that this project will exceed those dimensions.
So you're saying that they fall within the parameters by exceeding those dimensions, or that they don't follow the parameters by exceeding those dimensions? I guess that's the confusion that I'm running into. I understand the two differences. You have PM and then you've got the C3. So, you know, we're talking about a project that incorporates both those zonings, but it's just confusing to me, I guess, and I know you're trying to explain it, and maybe it's just my simple-mindedness, but I'm trying to understand which way this falls.
Go ahead.
Go ahead.
Just that 15 is a citywide minimum in any zoning district. You're not meant to have any lot that's less than 5,000 square feet.
Got that.
Number 14 is specific to these zoning districts. These lots meet the standards for both the citywide minimum and their zoning district specific minimum lot size.
Okay, great. Thank you for clarifying that. Thank you. That's all I have for right now. Thank you.
Any other questions from commissioners? Okay, seeing none, we will open the public hearing. This is a public hearing this evening, and we are here to listen to any comment from those in the room as well as those that are listening in. Anybody in the room care to step up and address us on this project? Seeing none, I'll ask staff, do we have anybody calling in?
Yes, we do have a Victoria. I'll go ahead and put you through. Victoria,
Good evening. My name is Victoria Young. Thank you for the... I'm
Yes,
sorry, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. Please proceed.
Okay, great. Good evening. My name is Victoria Young. Thank you for the opportunity to speak before the Planning Commission today. I'm an attorney at Lazo Drury LLP, and I'm speaking on behalf of Supporters Alliance for Environmental Responsibility, or SAFER. SAFER requests that the Planning Commission refrain from approving the addendum to the 2016 M&D for the proposed project until the city prepares an EIR or revised M&D for the project. SAFER alleges that the addendum to the 2016 M&D is improper because the addendum's conclusions about the project's impacts to biological resources are not supported by substantial evidence. The addendum fails to provide substantial evidence that no new significant or substantially more severe impacts will occur to special status plant and animal species that were previously identified as on or potentially on the project site in the 2016 MND. The 2016 MND concluded that appropriate habitat and soil conditions are present on the project site for 5 special status plants and 18 special status animals. According to the MND, at least 8 special status animal species were observed on site during wildlife surveys in 2014. However, it appears based on the information included in the addendum that no other wildlife surveys have been conducted since 2014 on the project site. To guarantee that no new special status species are currently on the project site, SAFER recommends that new wildlife surveys should be conducted and included in an EIR or revised M&D before any further construction on the site proceeds. That concludes my comments. Thank you for your time and consideration.
Thank you very much for providing those. As we do always with public hearings, we'll take all public comment first, and then we'll come back and discuss each of the points that are raised. Do we have any additional callers who would like to provide commentary?
No, that's the only caller.
Okay. One last time for the room. Would anybody like to comment? Otherwise, we will close the public hearing and bring it back to the Planning Commission. We just had feedback from Ms. Yunt, consistent with the letter, expanding a little bit on the letter that we received. I guess we have heard this. We have gotten some commentary from legal counsel, and I would ask counsel again, is there anything additional that you would add based on the testimony that we just heard?
Yes, thank you. I'm looking at the addendum itself, and I would direct the commission to what I believe is, golly, I think it's page 33 of the addendum itself, not the packet. So it is the biological resources discussion area, which points out that the 2016 mitigated negative declaration includes 27 mitigation measures BR1 through BR27 to reduce potential impacts to special status species. as well as addressing, I believe, also special status plants. So that is part of your approvals today, would be to impose those mitigation measures that were previously adopted. Further, the addendum explains that the project site has been disturbed and graded, which I do not know, and maybe one of staff could weigh in. I do not know was the case in 2014. But this disturbance has reduced the potential for the project to serve as habitat. However, the mitigation measures would remain, and mitigation fees with respect to the Joaquin Kit Fox would not be applied to this project because that fee was previously paid for by the developer of track 2778. And it's on that basis, that substantial evidence, that the addendum concludes that the development of this project would not result in any new or more significant impacts, to the extent that a 2014 survey that predated the 2016 MND found special status species or plants. Those surveys were addressed in the 2016 MND, which is now past challenge. And so nothing in the commenters' presentation suggests any basis for finding the addendum less than adequate for your purposes of approving this project.
Okay, thank you for adding that insight. Okay, at this point in time, we have gone through public commentary. It's back to the commission for discussion prior to potentially a motion. Do we have discussion? Let's go to Mr. Covarrubias.
Personally, I like the project. I think it's a good project. I think it's good for our community. I don't have any issues with anything I've seen today. At this point, I like it. I am interested to see what the buildings individually are going to look like. Interested in who the tenants are going to be, and the financial impact, positive impact, I think it'll have on our city. So with that, I think it was a well done presentation by staff and the design team.
Thank you. Commissioner Jorgensen.
I too think that this is a really good project for the city, and I'm supportive of it. I remain uncomfortable with the way Building 3 is, the mass of Building 3 is indicated as it faces wisteria. And I'm supportive of the project. I would like to, I don't know if as part of the motion or just a comment to go on record, that when the design for Building 3 comes back to DRC, that more effort is made to articulate that facade and that mass as they initially requested. And that's my only comment. Other than that, I support the project.
Great, thank you. Mr. Christensen.
I don't have any comments. I'm in favor of the project. I like it. I think it's going to be a nice benefit to that particular area. I would like to see, do we have another shot of the front of Building 3? Just curiosity. I know it's been discussed. From the street view? Okay, thank you.
Okay. Okay, great. Mr. Gibson.
I am in favor of this project. I share the concern of Commissioner Jorgensen, and I would support that when Building 3 comes back, that there is some special consideration of that. It just seems like there's a huge wall really, really close to the street, and I think that needs to be taken into consideration. That being said, I think this is a well-planned project. I think it's a project that the city desperately needs, where there actually is a huge shortage of these type facilities in the town. And I think that these are probably going to get filled up really easily and really fast. So David's going to have to get busy on coming up with that easement for that property over there.
Thank you, Commissioner Christensen, or Commissioner Gibson. I too am supportive of the project. I think it's extremely well designed. I'm glad to see it pushing the needle of the jobs housing balance a bit in this community by adding employment. I think that's really important. I think it's well designed in the context of what's across the street in Wisteria. I would share my fellow commissioners' reactions to building 3 and 4 and any efforts to kind of soften that facade or articulate facade to take away a little bit of that street presence would be helpful there. So I would certainly support that. I think it's a very well done project, and I think it's one that'll be a credit to the city. If there are no further discussion points, we have a couple of draft resolutions in our packets. A, approving MND addendum, and draft resolution B, approving PD 21-13, LLA, and OTR 21-24. Would anybody like to offer a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move to approve draft resolution A for an addendum to the 2016 mitigated negative declaration for the Golden Hill Business Park.
We have a motion for resolution A. Is there a second?
I'll second that.
The second from Commissioner Christensen. Any discussion? Hearing none, I would ask staff to please call the roll.
Commissioner Gibson?
Aye.
Commissioner Christensen?
Aye.
Commissioner Covarrubias?
Aye.
Commissioner Jorgensen?
Aye.
Chairperson Kogler?
Aye.
Motion passes 5-0.
Mr. Chairman, I move to approve draft resolution B for PD 21-13, PRAL 21-0054, and OTR 2124, subject to the conditions of approval, adding that when building 3 comes back to DRC, that there's consideration for the facade and the mass of that building.
Okay. We have a motion. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Second from Commissioner Jorgensen. Any further discussion? Hearing and seeing none, I would ask staff to please call the roll again.
Who was the second? Commissioner Gibson?
Aye.
Commissioner Jorgensen?
Aye.
Commissioner Covarrubias?
Aye.
Commissioner Christensen?
Aye.
Chairperson Kogler?
Aye.
Motion passes 5-0.
Thank you very much.
Okay. Commission, okay with going forward? Anybody want a little stretch break for a minute? You want to take a quick stretch break or we move forward? We're on with it. All right. Perfect. Okay. We will move into our second public hearing of the evening, which is an amendment for plan development at San Antonio Winery, P16-0069, AMD 22-06, CUP 14-006, SPA 14-002. The applicant is San Antonio Winery. The project is 2610 East Highway 46. The APN is 025-391-075. With that, I would ask, it looks like Darcy has beat me to the punch, and we have a staff report.
Yes. Good evening, Mr. Chairman and members of the Commission. Darcy Delgado, Associate Planner. So as mentioned, this is an amendment to the entitlements so that you had gone over. So this is an amendment to San Antonio Winery, where they have the existing wine tasting facility at 2610 Buena Vista Drive, which is at the intersection of Highway 46 East and Buena Vista Drive. All right, so the original tasting room was established on the site in 1986 via conditional use permit, and then various additions and remodels have taken place over the years to establish the current facility that is owned and operated by San Antonio Winery. And so I wanted to go through this table, which shows some important background history on the site. So here we'll start with the initial set of use permits and amendments that occurred in 2015. This set of amendments included a general plan amendment, which changed the land use from residential single family to residential multifamily, and included an allocation of 2 dwelling units to the site, which brought them up to 4 dwelling units by right. It also included a rezone from R1 B4 to R2 mixed use. There was a specific plan amendment to the Borky area specific plan to include mixed uses at this location, as well as a development plan and a conditional use permit, which was to add 12,000 square feet of new mixed use development to the property, and then a variety of commercial uses to be allowed on the ground floor commercial. And so here is the 2015 site landscape plan. And so I've just, in blue showed that this is a location of the existing wine tasting building, and then in pink, that is the future development for the mixed use and with the 2015 amendments for the development plan and the use permit. Those are the buildings that would have been included. All right, so then moving on, in 2017, the owners amended the development plan and the use permit to enclose the existing patio for indoor dining, since they already had an existing commercial kitchen. So as part of this process, staff recognized phase 1 as the existing tasting room, and then phase 2 as the undeveloped mixed use component, so that we could keep track of this project with the amendment. And so again, pulling up that same graphic, just highlighting where the enclosed patio dining area was established. And then in red, that is really where we started tracking this as phase 1, and then phase 2 being the future mixed-use development. All right, and then in 2019, in anticipation of submitting for building permits for the phase 2 development, the owners had submitted some modifications to their architecture, and that was initially for staff's review, as the building permits were going to go through staff. Since staff could not approve the modifications because they were different architectural style than what was initially approved, we did kick it up to the DRC, and ultimately the DRC did approve the architectural changes. And so here, the larger graphic shows the changes to the architecture, being more of like a modern farmhouse, and then on the bottom right, you have the Spanish style elevations that were originally approved for that project. So, so since the 2019 DRC approval, there have not been any building permits submitted, and I suspect that was probably a little bit due to the ramifications of COVID. And so just to kind of summarize to date where we're at, the only the modifications to the tasting room to add the restaurant component for phase 1 have been completed. So we're still working to get phase 2 going, and they have an existing entitlement to move forward. So that moves us to the current amendment request, which is really the request of the applicant tonight. So as I mentioned, the site has the existing entitlement to establish the mixed use project as part of phase 2. So originally that would be the 2 buildings with the 4 ground floor units being strictly for commercial uses, and then the 4 upper floor units being strictly for residential uses. So with the amendment request, the applicant is wanting to make some changes to their development plan. So they're asking to increase their mixed use building square footage by 921 square feet. They're going to eliminate that detached restaurant, and the reason for that is since they were able to include the restaurant in the existing wine tasting building, there's no longer a need for the detached standalone restaurant. They're also going to increase some of their outdoor seating for the wine tasting, and that would be an additional 651 square feet. Also, as part of the request, would be to have some flexibility with the ground floor spaces on those 2 buildings. So the request would be to have any mix of residential, commercial, or live workspaces on those 4 ground floor units, whereas the upper floor would remain as residential. So currently, they have the ability to do ground floor commercial, upper floor residential. This request would change that so they would have more flexibility on those ground floor uses. And then so to facilitate the scenario in which all 8 units could be residential, the applicant is also requesting that the site be allocated 2 surplus density units. So as part of the original general plan and rezone that happened, the general plan amendment and rezone entitlements from 2015, the site had initially received an allocation of 2 surplus density units in addition to the 2 it already had with the R1 zoning when it was R1. So that got them up to the 4 units. However, based on the lot's developable area, they could have requested additional density at that time. And so really in short, the parcel could have supported 6 density units, but for one reason or another, they were only allocated enough units to match the development plan at the time, which was the 4 units. So because the request for an allocation of 2 surplus density units would grant this parcel 6 density units, The action really is making the property's density consistent with the land use designation of the RMF8, as well as the R2 zoning that's been in place since 2015. And also modifying the text of the Borky area specific plan to allow up to 8 residential units would kind of be a cleanup item to get this parcel consistent across the board, really, with the land use and zoning designations, but then also to facilitate the additional units. So some of these amendments, I know there's a lot going on, but they're all kind of necessary to move this forward as one amendment project. And so just to kind of clarify on the screen, I have the proposed text for the from the Borky area specific plan. I made some changes since it was published in the staff report, and by adding in pink some fractional and then the equivalent of 6 residential density units. The reason I made these changes is because when we start talking about density and being consistent with the land use designation and then the zoning, I felt that the way I had initially put the recommended changes in the specific plan, that it left it open to having 8 density units, and that was not the intent. It was supposed to be 8 fractional units, and so that's why I've made the change on the screen for you. All right, so as part of the changes to the project, there were various things that staff really needed to take a look at to make sure that we could continue to meet the applicable development standards with this project. So the mixed-use overlay zoning, which is already in place, it indicates that residential uses should be located above the first floor to the rear or side of commercial uses, but it doesn't prohibit them from being integrated into the first floor, and so that's really why the applicant is wanting the flexibility to have residential on the ground floor, is because it doesn't prohibit it. And so to separate residential uses from the non-residential uses, there are site design guidelines that would require residential privacy by design to limit views into the primary living quarters of those residential units. So as you can see on the screen, I've included a rendering showing what the plan is for the glazing on the front elevation. The applicant is proposing to use a top-down, bottom-up shade, which would be used at the tenant's discretion to provide the privacy if the units on the ground, if any of the units on the ground floor were at any point used for residential purposes or even a live-work scenario. And then certainly commercial uses would more than likely have them open at all times. So in this case, the Planning Commission would need to make a finding that the visual privacy strategy for the using that approach would meet the design guideline for establishing that privacy of the residential uses. And then another development standard that staff heavily critiqued was the amount of parking required by the project to make sure that we're still meeting those minimum parking requirements based on the kind of change in, of uses for the ground floor. So here's the table that I put together, kind of showing how we had the original number of parking spaces from the 2017 amendment that we last worked on, that they needed originally 56 parking spaces. And then the next column over that shows total parking spaces required 34 to 45 and a half. So that's taking into account the different alternatives of having mix of residential, live, work, and commercial on the ground floor. And then the final column on the far right, which shows you the 22 to 30 parking spaces required, that takes into account a 33% reduction for having a mixed-use project, which I don't think was taken into consideration in 2015 when they did the original project. So they could have had less parking way back when, but anyway, so with the project as they presented it, they would be providing 43 parking spaces. So regardless of where the uses, how they would interchange on the ground floor, they would be adequately parked. So then another key factor that staff took a look at with the proposed changes was establishing a list of permitted uses that would be compatible with one another, regardless of whether the ground floor spaces were occupied by the residential, commercial, or live work uses. So to ensure that future ground floor uses would be compatible, the list shown on the screen is also, it's replicated from a condition of approval, which is in the draft resolution A for the conditional use permit and the development plan. And so these uses would restrict what's allowed as far as the commercial activity. So small scale commercial uses being home occupation businesses, specialty food and beverage sales, where production of products occurs off site. General merchandise, such as artisan shops and specialized retail specialized retail shops would also be permitted, as well as professional and administrative and business service offices, and then lastly, personal and business support services, but with the caveat that those do not include uses that generate noxious odors or uses that use abrasive chemicals. So maybe like nail salons, or if any of those personal services are using the products that have the noxious odors. All right, so this slide is just to clarify that staff would like to include some CEQA exemption findings to add to draft resolutions A, B, and C. And so the text that we would request be incorporated into those resolutions would read that no subsequent environmental review is necessary because the changes being made to the project are minor and would not result in any significant environmental impacts. Also, that there is no substantial evidence in the record suggesting any of the criteria set forth in state CEQA guidelines. Section 15162 is met, and accordingly, no subsequent environmental review is necessary. And then this slide is just something that was caught once the staff report was published, a clarification that from the standard conditions of approval, number 9 is no longer relevant. This is something that had initially been carried forward from 2015 to 2017, and this is one parcel, so there is no reason that they need to have a reciprocal parking and access easement. Staff would be happy to uncheck this box. This project does need to go to City Council because of the specific plan amendment and surplus density allocation, so we could fix this with the City Council resolutions, but certainly the Planning Commission could make a recommendation that be carried, that we fix it with that next step. And so that kind of brings me to the end. As you've heard tonight, we're requesting a modification to an existing entitlement. So there are 3 resolutions as part of option 1. So draft resolution A is for the conditional use permit and the development plan. So I've noted that there's some recommended changes to the resolution for the CEQA findings, as well as the condition number 9, which I just showed you. And then draft resolution B, which pertains to the specific plan amendment. Again, there's some staff recommended changes specific to the CEQA findings. And then draft resolution C is for the recommendation of allocating 2 surplus density units to the site. And again, with some staff changes recommended in there. Option 2 would be to approve the project with modifications. The form of the buildings is really been, unchanged. There's some slight increases in square footage, but I think the modifications that the Planning Commission might consider if there's something specific to the uses, or the question of the flexibility of the ground floor units, or the anything to do with the allocation of the units. But the form, I think, has really been established and carried forward with those prior entitlements. And then additional options would be to refer this back to staff or the DRC for additional analysis, or to make findings to deny the application. So that concludes staff's presentation, so I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Darcy. That was a well-done summary of what's happened over time. Does the applicant have comments that you would like to provide for the commission as we, otherwise you'll have a chance to respond later.
Yes, good evening, commissioners. My name is Mandy Pickens with Angle Land Use Entitlement. I have a presentation to show you. Thank you, Darcy. That was well said. It's important to know there's been some background over the years. I've been involved in the past as well on some of these modifications, so happy to answer questions. But really, I just want to kind of hone in on the purpose of what the applicant is requesting today. And hope to show you kind of the purpose, the reasons why, and how we can feasibly operate these different scenarios for this lower level. So with that being said, tonight I'll walk you through the proposal, just basically run down some of these live work options, what they're going to look like, what the furniture inside of them looks like, and how they'll operate, the functionality of it all, how it will operate with, leasing, as Darcy touched on, some of the privacy. We have additional information to add to that, as well as some landscape components and just overall compliance with the city ordinance. Tonight, myself is here. One of the owners, David Rebely, is here as well. And then we have a collaboration of architects. Mr. Dwight Bond with Workshop Design Collective is here in the audience to answer any specifics, as well as Shannon Reese is on virtually with Reese Design Studio to answer any specific architectural questions you might have regarding the design. Darcy pretty much covered this, but I will just go down briefly. We're here to discuss phase 2 today, which is highlighted on that graphic. We're really here. We're not doing any modification to the tasting room restaurant, with the exception of we removed that detached restaurant, and in place of that, doing a nice outdoor tasting terrace, or if somebody wants to consume food in that area as well. Really, the main like meat and potatoes of this request is there's been a lot of changes on with the economy and how we operate with these smaller type professional offices through this pandemic. And so we've looked at some other case studies in California that have been adopting these like live-work environment changes and mix of uses, where it's not so much the traditional mixed use with commercial on the bottom, residential on top. Things are evolving. Planning is changing, and so we are trying to adapt and provide some flexibility to these tenants. I want you to keep in mind that we're discussing only the lower floor of these 4 units. These 4 units are small. They're about like 719 square feet. So they can only accommodate, if they were to have a live-work situation, there's only 1 bedroom, which would be in the back, and in the front would be where you would conduct a business or have a / living room, if you will, and I can show you that with some graphics. Again, so the real reasoning behind this, again, is just to have the flexibility to think outside of the box. We have these empty floor units that have already been approved for commercial uses. They're small commercial uses. We'd like to have the option where one could reside and also run their business out of it. Obviously, we have restrictions that we've worked with staff on what type of businesses that we would see in those locations. It's not one size fits all. There will be restrictions. So I like to just work through the scenarios that you might see. Again, we have vetted through all the different alternatives I'll be speaking on tonight with staff, including making sure we have the appropriate density, which is already allowed on site. Previous entitlements allowed mixed use capability as well as the ability to have that residential density. And now since fractional density calculations have been adopted, we have utilized those. And really just again, we're focusing on this shell. These will all be built the same on the lower floor to be able to accommodate any different type of tenancy that we're talking about today. So with that being said, this is the graphic that shows the approved, originally approved project with the commercial on the bottom. You could see the architect put some furniture placement so you could get an idea on how these spaces would be occupied with, a private office in the back, maybe some shared office spaces in the front. So that's approved. This is the new scenario that we are looking to incorporate into this project. This is the live-work design. Here you will see that as you enter to one of these units, again, there could be the option to have a shared office in the front, but actually have the owner of the company or possible employee live on site. So they'd be able to have their own bathroom and workspace in the front. But there's lots of different options on how you can put this furniture to be able to have the live work, but that's just kind of the layout. I'm welcome to go back to any of these graphics if you'd like to. This is showing all residential. This would be all residential on the ground. I'm sorry, this is all live. This was inappropriately mixed. Sorry about that. That's showing also the live work there. This is showing a better demonstration of how this might look if there was maybe potentially one unit having commercial in one space, one having a live work, one having all residential. And so you could just see the different types of flexibility and floor plan options for either of these rooms. Of course, and the architect can walk you through a little more detail if you like, just to know that there's probably like flexible partition in the back for the bedroom, et cetera. But the outer shell of these structures will all be the same, built the same, with the same quality construction, whether it's commercial or residential. Again, so the type of tenants that you're going to see occupying these lower level units are, it's going to attract a certain lifestyle. Again, they're small units, around 700 square feet. They're for like a single person or so to live in with a small business. It's mostly probably more like a business professional type of artist. So there's just a higher demand since the pandemic to have, work from home, but then you still want to have clients maybe come. And you don't necessarily want to have an office. I myself do the same thing for my business. And it's nice to be able to have like interaction if you can at a home office or something like at an elevated level than that. So we have discussed, we've been through to DRC 3 times, and one of some of the comments that came up were, what type of uses are we going to see? There was concerns with noise, of course. There were concerns with any like hazardous materials. Hours, we don't foresee anything where they're doing like trucking deliveries or anything of that nature. These are really small units and aren't able to accommodate those type of businesses. So with that being said, we worked with staff to come up with the limitation on uses. And this is an excerpt that is taken from the recommended conditions of approval by staff. We are in agreement with these. And just so you know, when the tenant will come in, if they were to run a business out of this, they would require a business license. And I imagine that, I know in other jurisdictions that when you do that, they have a zoning clearance that makes sure that your business can be adequately parked and that you are compliant with the original approval, which are these types of businesses. So outside of these businesses would not be permitted. It would, if there was something outside of the box, it would have to come back to your commission to be decided. So just so you know, I know one of those questions came up with the previous project on what type of tenants are taking these buildings, and then, who makes the decision if they can occupy those buildings or not. So this is a list that we are all on page. Management, so just so you know, this isn't a condo map. So these aren't individually owned tenants. This is run by the landowner, has jurisdiction over all of the units, so there'll be rentals. With that being said, there'll be 1-year leases for all the units, and they'll have a specific leasing agreement that discusses all of these items that you see on the slide, your typical landlord maintenance. They'll have discussion on the type of uses that are allowed based on the conditions of approval, parking requirements, et cetera. As you could see, we ran through all of the different options for each use, and all can be parked, in fact, over-parked. Back to visual, I know this is some of the comments that we took into consideration from the DRC, which was to have options to have privacy on the lower levels. So if you could see with the green walls there, we incorporated, and then the additional glazing system with the pull down shades, and then it still allows light to come in from the top, as you could see. This is done in some other case studies that we have seen as well, which have a lower level work-live type of units on the ground level. This is a section here that shows kind of the relationship on the office living, where the bedroom is in relation to how the blinds are going to work, et cetera. We can go into that more detail if you like with the architect. Same as this, the noise, if there's any concern with noise between any units with different land uses, we were able to have construction that will have, achieve an STC rating of 56. So we're going above and beyond with double studded wall, with addition to meeting all the green codes, et cetera, from top to bottom, have the required firewall separation, and also with the glazing, those are going to be a lot thicker, not only to accommodate because it is next to the 46 East Freeway, or highway, if you will, but also just to maintain that that privacy for any tenants above and below. Additionally, we'll have evergreen landscaping that's going to be planted along the corridor 46, so it's screened from seeing down into these units, as well as up close to the units. One of the requirements will be to just show compliance with the noise study at time of building permit review. We actually updated the original noise study to just ensure compliance for this amended project. Private open space, I know this is important for individual units, residential. There is flexibility on the bottom floor to have its own private storage as well as private open space. The private open space are illustrated in blue, showing the back units, and you could see the rendering with their decks and so forth. And there's also several common areas noted in purple. As mentioned before, this is an amendment. So there was an original mitigated negative declaration that was done back in 2015. But with the amended requirement, and one of those things was brought up with the last hearing item was that they don't typically require reports to be done once you do an amendment. However, we provided updated documents that looked at additional noise concern, additional traffic concerns, and is there any additional water use with all of these alternatives that we're discussing tonight, and also parking and land use. All of those were review and vetted through the city staff, and it was shown that this new project is actually equal to or less than the original impacts from the original approved CUP back in 2015. In addition to that, all of these live work, commercial and residential on the bottom floor can all be demonstrated that they are compliant with the city ordinance and general plan. This, and I'll have Dwight Vaughn with Workshop Design Collective if he wants to kind of give his take on this, since he has personal experience living in a live work community. This is one in South Pasadena with the live work situation, and I'll have him touch on that more, but this is a slide we can refer back to. But there is such thing. This is happening in California. There's some in the pipeline that are going through, and it's evolving. With that being said, I'd just like to conclude that we're looking for Planning Commission recommendation. This does need to go to City Council because it does have to amend the Borky specific plan, general plan, and some other items that weren't touched on the 2015 CUP. We felt that this is a boutique small project. We're talking about a few units here. We have the ability to have flexibility for people that need this in this economy, in these type of situations. You have some of your other surrounding housing developments, multifamily. They're larger, they have larger accommodations. These are like your one bedroom. So it diversifies the housing market, as well as providing this new idea of this live work. I mean, it might not be a new idea, but since we've been in the process, these are more evolving. Some of these commercial spaces aren't being occupied, and this is an opportunity to have that flexibility so somebody who can use those for both and it's zoned appropriately. So we feel that this is a good fit for this specific site. With that being said, that concludes my presentation. Again, myself and the ownership and architect are available for any specific questions you have. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, questions from commissioners, of staff and or the applicant? Rob, you want to start us off?
I guess a question for staff to start. I'm not familiar with any other projects of this type in our city right now, right? Is that accurate? These live work type scenarios.
You have the ability to do live work right now in the downtown. So I think that we have the T3 flex zone in the downtown where you can see it going from residential back to commercial with a tenant improvement. So we do see it on the west side, but I think is in terms of the east side to have the project of this kind, it is new.
It is new. I guess I mean, it's interesting to me. I'm not sure I'm against it. But I'm not sure I'm for it either. I'm just trying to figure it out. There was a couple comments that were made. So talk to me a little bit more about the privacy aspect of this, because I think the hard part with that is we don't know for sure if all units downstairs are going to be commercial or if they're going to be this live-work type scenario, right? So how do we make sure the privacy aspect of this is meeting all the requirements?
Right. So, so as I mentioned, the mixed use overlay has some development standards that we had to review when initially reviewing the project to make sure that you could hit all of those criteria, knowing that it would change. One day it could be residential, and then, a few months later, resident might move out and a new tenant comes in and it's commercial, but then, and that could happen for any of the 4 ground floor units, so they could change at any time just with the market demand of what's needed. And so the big concern was the privacy aspect, because most times we see residential above or behind. So with the proposal to have to still create the same form with the glazing on for all the ground floor units, but then to have more of an interior design approach for the screens, the top-down, bottom-up screens. That is something that the Planning Commission would need to find is meeting that design standard, that the residential privacy has been established, so that in the event a unit is residential, they have that privacy aspect.
Yeah, I think that's where I'm stumbling a little bit, because I'm not sold that just a shade, pulling down a shade is adequate privacy. Again, because I'm trying to visualize it. Okay, I need privacy. Let me grab a shade, pull it down. Now I'm private. I don't know. I'm struggling with that a little bit, and it looks like somebody may want to make a comment about that.
Hi, I'm happy to. My name is Dwight Bonds. I'm the design architect I'm the person. I'll go back here. My wife and I live here. We live in South Pasadena. So this is just briefly just kind of describe how our building works, which I think very much informed how we worked on this project, the solutions that we were hoping would be successful. This building is 52 units. It's an old industrial building, adaptive reuse, and there are a whole mix of the same kind of uses that they're proposing here, with architects, engineers, attorneys, but we also have families that live here and just rent these units. In the front of the building, which you see the image on the bottom left and to the bottom right, those are units. There are 3 units that actually are directly right on the street, very much similar to what we're proposing here for Buena Vista. And the way these 3 units work is currently, and our building is a condo, so everybody owns their units, and the tenants or the people that live here have been there for a long time. Of these 3 units, the unit that we're looking at here on the corner is strictly a business, and she manufactures clothing for kids. And the nice advantage that these 3 units have over the rest of us is that their tenants and or clients or people that are providing them services can walk right up from the street, much like what the Buena Vista project does. In this scenario, the way they mitigate privacy, like during the day, their windows are always open, they're thriving, they're busy, visual from the street. They have curtains that they close when they shut down their shop and they go home. There's another tenant right next to them that does live work. So in their solution, they in their bedrooms, the bedrooms are always with curtains, are always closed. There is a buffer too, by the way, with landscaping, as you can see. It's not right on the sidewalk. The sidewalk is probably 10 feet away. And during the day, when they're a software engineering company, during the day their windows are open, and they have 4 or 5 people that work with them there. And the last tenant that's on this street is strictly residential. But the way they mitigate it is with shades. And again, there's buffers. The interesting thing about these types of units and what I've experienced in our building is that these aren't high occupancy uses like a restaurant or a cafe where there's a lot of people walking by. Depending on the uses that end up leasing spaces here at Buena Vista, whether they're commercial or live work or residential, I think what we've proposed is in our building here in South Pasadena, there's no rules. That's why you have different kind of window shades, different kind of treatments that people have chosen to do. For the Buena Vista project, we're proposing, because there's just 3 units in the one building and one in the other, that they use the same sort of up-down shades that we were talking about. And they're, that is that they allow, these are big, tall windows, probably 12 feet tall, that we're designing for these spaces. And what we want to be able to do is provide privacy. If this is just a living room that you can walk by, but have a shade that would come up 8 feet to provide privacy, but the natural light can still come in during the day. And at night, you get the privacy. So that's basically how we're envisioning that this project can be flexible, can provide the owners with a variety of tenants that might want to live here or work here or both. And it's a challenging issue, privacy for sure, absolutely. I think what I love about this little project that goes beyond that, and I think the connection to the winery and the outdoor tasting room and the open spaces, it's a kind of project I would love to have. It's what we're missing in this building. This building is purely just kind of a commercial building, and I love the connection to the winery and the tasting room in this facility, and the ability with laptops and kind of the way that we run our company. If you look at the top left corner, how we've dealt with or mitigated with privacy. You see there's 1, 2, 3, 5, there's a door and 4 window panes on our balcony. And the first 3 where the door is and the other 2, it's open, right? You can see in, I'm standing by the kitchen, and that's our mural in the background. The 2 on the right are frosted, because what we've done is integrated sliding panels that at night we slide them all the way over. Of course, the door is closed, and we have complete privacy. During the day, we open them all up. We want the natural light in, and that's the flexibility that we've chosen to do. Again, in our building, everybody does it a little bit differently. And that's, in a sense, kind of how we enjoy using this space. We're a small firm. We use Zoom. That really helps. That when that came along during the pandemic, it really helped us communicate with all of our consultants and how we run our company. But we also love the opportunity to bring clients into our space. And that's good work. I hope that answers your question, or at least gives you some insight.
Give me some insight. Yeah, thank you for that. So I guess, I have more questions, but I'm trying to figure out which way to go with this. So if the top units are all residential, and the bottom units are a mix of potential residential and commercial, and they're 1-year leases, is that 1-year leases is proposed for both top and bottom, whether it's commercial or residential?
Yes, Mandy Pickens with Angle. Yes, that's correct.
That is correct. So if somebody leases on the bottom floor residential, and after 1 year leaves, you could then turn around and lease it commercial?
Correct, that's the idea, or a live work.
Or live work. Mm-hmm. So the units, if I'm understanding, all the bottom units are structured or built the same. The TIs are all the same.
Yes, yes.
So whether it's commercial or residential.
Correct.
What kind of price point are we looking at? Are these affordable? Are these? Rents are expensive right now. Right, so what's the idea on?
I can't put a price point to that, unfortunately. I don't think ownership can either. They're different uses. If you want to answer that, that's fine.
Yeah.
Come up here.
Could you identify yourself, please?
Yeah, David Rebley. I'm with San Antonio Winery.
Thank you.
Sorry. We haven't thought of price point at this point. We don't know if we're going to do affordable, or it'd be more market rate at this time. This is a project that's in the near future, so we aren't quite at that price point yet. We're just trying to get to this process first and see how we're going to develop that area. and if we can develop that area. So that'll have to be a further discussion down the road.
Well, the challenge that we have, just my perspective, affordable housing right now is a problem in Paso Robles. And so when I see an opportunity here for a new residential dwelling to house folks, an individual, professional, I'm just curious, again, just kind of where we would find, you know, I'll use my son. He had to rent an 800 square foot facility on Oak Street in Paso Robles, $2,200 for an 800 square foot facility. Luckily, it was 2 bedrooms, so he could share it. But $2,200 for an 800 square foot facility. So when I see something like this, I think to myself, what's the price point? So just food for thought.
No, understood, and I appreciate that, and we'll definitely take that into consideration.
Okay. Hey, Darcy, the parking. So whether it's commercial or residential, there's adequate parking. If it's mixed, I think you mentioned that already. Just want to make sure that's the case.
Yeah, so that table that I had put on the screen, we took a look at all of the scenarios of whether it was, you know, all residential or all commercial and what the more intensive, you know, parking requirements would be, factored in the shared parking reduction of the 33% reduction. And so they were in that range of, I think it was 22 to 30 that are required at any one time. And they'll be providing, I think it was 43.
43. And those
43
include
spaces.
handicap and everything, right? Okay. All right. I think I might have 1 or 2 questions more that I'm Oh, I will ask this one. Signage. How's that going to work? So all of a sudden it's commercial one day and a year later it's residential.
Right. So there is a condition of approval, and this kind of got carried forward. You'll note in the staff report and all the attachments for draft resolution A that we did track changes to show what had changed, because, you know, this some of the conditions are still relevant for phase 2 because it hasn't been developed. So we wanted to show what was changing. There are conditions related to signage for a master sign program to be established for phase 2. So they would have to do that prior to issuance of building permits.
Okay.
And I think that as they would change, that's probably a question for the applicant. So if it's commercial and then goes back to residential, what happens to the sign, I think, would be a question for the applicant.
Okay. All right. I'll let my other fellow commissioners ask some questions.
Great. Thank you. Commissioner Jorgensen.
I've had personal experience with live-work neighborhoods for at least 15 years, probably 18. They're not new. My office was in the Lafayette neighborhood of Balboa Peninsula and Newport Beach, and there were old buildings converted to live-work and an entire block on both sides of the street of new live-work facilities built. So this concept isn't new to me. It isn't strange to me. I think it'll be great. I think that the people who want to live there are people who don't want a suburban experience in a traditional manner, and I think it'll be energetic, lively, and great. So I have no concerns about it.
Thank you. Mr. Christensen.
Thank you. I've got a few questions. So to clarify, you're asking us to make this something that's basically could be all residential, or basically it can be the mixed use, which was initially submitted. Is that an over clarification of it, or?
So the request is to recommend approval to have any mix of uses on the ground floor, ranging from commercial, residential to live work. So each of the units could change. Did I understand that question correctly?
I think you did, yeah. Thank you. So when I saw this on DRC, it was proposed that live work, obviously, you live above and you work down below, or somebody works down below, but somebody living up above. Is that correct?
So in this case, the 8 units, so the 4 upper floor units are completely separate from the 4 ground floor units.
Okay.
The upper floor units will always be residential. As the leases end, it'll remain residential. But then the ground floor units are fully, you know, each space is fully contained. And then as Mandy had shown, they're the furniture can be moved around so that the bedrooms on the ground floor are always in the back, but if it's a commercial use, maybe it's somebody's office.
Right, no, I understand, thank you, I understand that. So what I was saying is there wasn't really, you don't have to work down below to live there or vice versa.
Correct.
Is the point, okay? So we're basically saying that, in my opinion, it's not a live-work, it could be a live-live, it basically is what we're also saying. So we're not really doing a live-work, it's a potential of a live-work, but it's a live-live if they want to make it a live-live, with some parameters on living downstairs.
Right. So the live work that could be like downstairs where you have a professional who, wants to have the clients come to their residence, right?
Sure.
So their bedrooms in the back and their offices in the front on the ground floor unit. So they can live and work in the same space.
Okay. Do they, so you don't have to, if you want to have if you want to live in the bottom unit, let's say one of the bottom units, I want to live there. And I'm not worried about privacy, or I think maybe I'm going to have to figure out privacy, but because that was a good point that Commissioner Covarrubias brought up. But let's say I want to live down the bottom. Do I have to have a business license of some kind? Is that a requirement?
No, you do not.
So I can it just becomes a residence, basically.
Correct.
Okay. To the note of surplus units, I was under the impression that the surplus units had all been allocated. So that if there was a development proposed in town for, let's say a housing development, that there were no more units available as of the master plan until 2030. Am I misunderstanding how that plays into this?
Let me get the clicker and I can switch back to staff's presentation. I did have an extra slide, which I probably could have thrown into the presentation to clarify it earlier on. So we had with the 2020 housing Alma update, we had established a surplus of 345 units. So that's the cycle 2 surplus density units that we previously allocated 20 units to the Highland Center site and then 79 units to the Woodlands Plaza site. So with the requested allocation of 2 units, there would still be remaining 244 units to be applied to any residential project throughout the city.
If it's a residential project, is that correct?
Correct.
So that's only based on the fact that we are willing to turn this into a potential residential project.
So the way the applicant is presenting it is that they are requesting 2 units in the event that all 8 leased spaces could be residential, but they're not necessarily going to require that all 8 units be residential. So in theory, the 2 surplus units could not be used if you had ground floor commercial being what the market really wants.
If it remains as a mixed use as it's currently.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. I appreciate that. That I understand that a little bit better now. I think the question on parking spaces was answered. I do have a question for Mr. Athey in regards to the traffic plan right outside. I've been in and out of there before. I'm familiar with the entrance and the ingress and egress, ingress and ingress. And since it dumps right out on that busy portion of Buena Vista, do you envision any potential issues there? Because we're talking about increasing, in my viewpoint, increasing the amount of maybe 24-hour traffic per se.
Yeah, certainly if it was, if there was well, first of all, let me just back up. David Athey, city engineer. Just trying to collect my thoughts. I have not been involved deeply.
And I kind of mainly I'm thinking mostly going left, but I feel that we're going to get a lot of impact there. So I just was curious what you're thinking.
Yeah, certainly. So I think this project was approved in 2014. Well, when was 2015. So this predates my time here. My understanding is that the action before you tonight will reduce the actual traffic volumes from the project with the changes they're proposing. Could it be a problem? Yes. Typically in the off hours of the night is not the time we were really concerned about. Highway 46 is highly impacted, as everybody's seen on Friday, Saturday, and Sunday afternoons. That's when you see the big backup on 101 that goes back to sometimes 13th Street or beyond. In terms of Buena Vista, we have not seen a deficiency there that would be caused by this project, especially since they're lowering the amount of traffic they're generating in the project. Could there be a problem, like a queuing event or something like that? Yes, that could happen, but I don't think it's going to be exacerbated by this project or a problem created with their turning movements from the project driveway to Buena Vista.
Okay, so even with the new housing that's being put in further down in the previous portion of River Oaks 2?
That's correct.
Okay.
Thank you. So the housing, so that when River Oaks 2 came in, when we did the traffic report for that, it accounted for the traffic volume in actually this project. And so the traffic from here is actually baked into that plan. So since this is reducing the amount of trips they're doing, it's actually going to make the situation better than what we had projected.
So we do have a study say that's reducing the amount.
Yeah. Okay. So in your agenda packet,
I probably have it in here, but I probably missed it.
Engineering submitted a traffic note.
I think I probably got a note on my list here. Okay, thank you. I appreciate that.
Okay.
One of the other questions I had was in regards to maybe I need to ask you this again, so I apologize, but maybe you'll know this first, Darcy. You referred to there being in the original development plan, there was an easement or maintenance agreement that was part of this. Was that recorded? Is that recorded on the property?
So you might be thinking of let's see. I want to make sure that we're talking about the same thing. So
yeah, this
right.
is it. Yeah, thank you.
So in 2015, we've carried these conditions forward as
Sure.
they've been amended over the years. And so coming back now for a second amendment, it was caught that this no longer seems applicable. And I have a feeling that it might have been an error at the time and it just got carried forward. So I took a look at this condition. It seems that because there really is no reason for an easement to be established here, that we can uncheck this. So this is something that would clean up moving forward, that the applicant really shouldn't have to establish a reciprocal parking or access easement because it is one parcel.
Okay, but there is no current recorded easement or maintenance agreement on the property itself?
No, because phase 2 hasn't been developed, I mean, this condition would have, had they submitted for it, we would have probably determined that this is irrelevant, right. But this is just a chance to clean it up.
Okay, my question was mostly just, is there something recorded there now? So that's pretty much, but you're just saying this was in the approval plans.
Right, yeah, okay. So nothing's been recorded.
Is there anything that that the city, is there any restriction in this approval or deed restriction that basically would prevent this applicant from condoing these particular units and obviously moving them from rental scenario to private ownership?
That's a good question. Because the amendment that they're wanting had so many trickle effects of having us, look at surplus density allocation and look at the specific plan amendment. I mean, in theory, you could add a condition if that was not, not a preference to have it be, condoized. That's a word.
I know.
I think we would be looking at the resolutions to see if there would be any conflict. Off the top of my head, I don't think there would be, but if there was the preference by the Planning Commission to prevent such a thing, I think you could have it live in the PD or the specific plan amendment, one of those resolutions that it not be allowed. But if it wasn't there and somebody requested it, I mean, we would, consider it.
Yeah. Okay. That's a good point. I think it gets to a lot of other complicated issues. But this would allow these units, because of the zoning, to be STRs.
So there is a condition related to short-term rentals that if and this again was carried forward actually predating the short-term rental ordinance, but that if anyone applied for a short-term rental permit, that they have to go through that process. So this would not prevent somebody from applying for a short-term rental permit if one was available.
Correct. So the zoning that it's under would allow for more STRs. Okay. Let's see. I think that's my questions for right now. If I've forgotten one, I'll ask it later. So jump right in.
Okay, Commissioner Gibson.
Thank you. Darcy, can you walk me through this fractional units again? I also made a note of this, that on page 245, and I think elsewhere, it said that we're being asked to grant up to 8 fractional units. But again, my understanding of the fractional units is strictly residential. Is that not correct?
So they're strictly residential. So based on their floor plan, most of the units count as 2/3 of a unit. And so when you add up the 8, if all 8 spaces were residential, they would need 6 density units, which when you say that, well, most of them are 2/3 of a unit, then they only, so 8 fractional units in this case equates to 6 density units.
Okay,
and
so
because
simplify this for me, because I'm absolutely lost. Okay. 8 fractional units. If we approve this, how many actual units, individual units, do you end up with?
you get 8 dwelling units maximum.
8 dwelling units maximum.
Yeah.
Totaling how many bedrooms?
Oh. 8.
So even though there's 8 fractional units, you're only going to end up with 8 bedrooms.
So you can, so you have fractional units or smaller units can have 1 bedroom. And then once I believe you get to 2 bedrooms or a certain size, you kick it up to being counted as 1 density unit or 1 unit.
Well, that's what I'm saying, but 8 fractional units, I'm just, again, because a full bedroom is what, 1 unit or half a unit?
I believe I have a slide that addressed fractional density. Okay, so here we have in red, kind of between the graphic and the black text. So studio and 1-bedroom dwellings that are less than 600 square feet count as half a density unit. Studio and 1-bedroom dwellings between 600 and 1 and 1,000, 2/3. The majority of the units are the 2/3 density unit. And then, Mandy, I believe that one of the units is a 2-bedroom in the building A, if I'm not mistaken, and I thought it was 2-bedroom.
Yes, that's correct. That would be the detached building there, and that was already approved. You have 2 bedrooms, the original approval.
But in theory, what I'm hearing is that regardless that there's 8 fractional units, even I'm looking at that math, equaling 6 density units, you could actually end up with 12 units.
So without running the numbers in my head at this moment, the way that we've structured the resolutions, in Resolution A, Draft Resolution A, it is very specific that this project is approved for only 6 density units or 8 fractional units. We could clarify.
Well, that's why I'm getting lost, because you say 8 fractional units, but I'm going, well, 8 fractional units, if they're only a studio less than 600 feet, that's 16 units.
So so we could go a step further. So we have floor plans that this is all based on. So the floor plans, if they changed, if they wanted to do smaller units, they would not be able to do necessarily more fractional units based on the way we've structured the approval. So I don't think that any loophole could make its way where you're doubling.
Okay, so where's my reassurance in here that it's no more than 8 units? Because I'm not seeing it anywhere.
So the specific plan also limits the project from having any more than 8 units.
Okay. All right, so what I'm hearing from you that even though we're into this fractional unit situation, the most that they're going to end up with, regardless, is 8 units.
Correct.
Okay. So, all right, I'm going to let that go for now. So on, where's the residential recreation or open space for the residential units? I mean, we know that at least half of them upstairs have to be residential. What happens if all of it is residential? Where's the residential open space?
Right, so they have individual private decks on the upper floor, and then the ground floor also, I believe, has some open space.
Yes, they all have their own private open space decks. I had a slide in my presentation that showed actually in one of the attachments that I had sent to you, there's a good exhibit that shows how each private open space requirement is met for each unit as well as a common open space requirement.
Okay,
is
so
met.
question of staff. Upstairs, I'm looking at a very small balcony area. What's the requirement for each of those units for recreational space? Because I don't personally view a balcony as recreational space.
So I don't know the number off the top of my head, but when I did plan check this, the open space requirements were met among all the other amenities that are required if all the units were residential.
All right. Staying on the topic of open space, I'm looking at mostly downstairs. It looks like from a representation on like page 285, the rendering, it looks like in essence decks. I mean, it looks like it's some sort of wood decking. And knowing that the downstairs were being asked to allow any mix of commercial, are those outside decks available for outdoor commercial use?
Yes, to the individual leasing the space,
Okay,
yes.
so not only we're going to be potentially approving the indoor use, we're also going to be approving to the extent of what's being shown, which could be some significant outdoor occupancy, correct?
So we did not dive into how the outdoor spaces could be used in the event they were commercial spaces, but certainly the Planning Commission could dive into that.
I'm thinking
And
it
how it
almost
would be
doubles or
different from
triples their
residential.
space of commercial space, right? Okay, so yeah, I'm going to let it go at this. I actually have problems with this just because of the lack of clarity. I think the amount of time that both between DRC and tonight that we're having to explain how this works illustrates why this project is not well thought out. I don't disagree with the live work. I mean, I've worked out of my home for the last 26 years, so I don't disagree with that concept. I know that it goes on, especially during COVID. Half my family got sent home, and half of them are still working from home. So I don't disagree with that. I just have a problem with the use of any, and with that lack of clarity on of things such as the occupancy, business hours, how signage changes, goes from resident. I'm not concerned about it going from, the way that it was described. It's residential, and then the next day it's commercial, and then all of a sudden signs and stuff start going up with the possibility of having early morning traffic and late hour traffic. I just view this as being problematic. This is like a city area. My sister, when she was younger, she lived above a bakery in Oakland. Totally get it. It was kind of cool. If you want to live in a city, that's what you're going to get. I'm not sure that that's appropriate for here and for Paso Robles. That's all my remarks.
May I speak to that? Mandy Pickens with Engle Land Use.
If there was a question there that you want to answer, since we're in the question
sure.
phase,
Yeah, no, I just,
please do.
we're open to suggestions you might have in relation to business hours, but because of the restrictions on the type of businesses, those will have to meet the ordinance and requirements for noise, business hours. These aren't the type of businesses that are going to be running into the nighttime. The goal is to be compatible with all of its surrounding. It's the boutique area set off to the side. It's not in the main downtown area. So once the winery closes in the evening, those will probably most likely be closed too, based on those type. I don't see accountants and architects having customers come in at 8, 9 o'clock. So that's kind of the intent of the idea. That we do have outdoor areas on the back. They're not illustrated in this area. And I understand if you have concerns with using the outdoor balconies, we're open to like restrictions if, like visitors not allowed to be, those outdoor balconies are really intended for if there's a live work situation for the residents to enjoy, to have their own private space. I wouldn't see people coming just to go out there and use that for meetings and that sort of thing, if you will. So we're open to, if you have concerns, maybe some constructive criticism or suggestions on hours or some sort of restriction that could mitigate that. We're open to that. Thank you.
Thank you. I am the veteran, I guess, of 2 times out of the 3 that went to DRC. I was on that group. And so I've had an opportunity that maybe other first-timers haven't had as much tonight to learn more about and become more accustomed to this. So I don't really have any questions. I will reserve some comments when we get to that portion of our agenda. So I will ask if any other commissioners have any questions prior to opening public hearing. Yes, Commissioner Covarrubias.
Darcy, please clarify for me, because now I am confused as well a little bit. This fractional, basically, can any of the units be converted to a 2-bedroom unit? I know there's one already allocated, but can any of the units all of a sudden turn around and become 2-bedroom units? I know they're small.
No, because then that would change and kick them up to being counted as one density unit.
Right. Okay. I just want to make sure I'm understanding that correctly. So the answer is no.
Correct.
But there's already one 2-bedroom
Yeah, I believe it's on the screen.
Right. It's detached, right?
It's the detached one. It's on the second floor. That is the 2-bedroom unit that counts as one density unit. All the others, I believe, are 2/3 of a unit.
Okay. And I'm just curious, because it's something I thought of because of something my daughter said recently. Are pets going to be allowed in this facility?
David Reevely with Winery. No, we haven't. Again, that's a discussion that we'll have to bring to the table, but we haven't discussed pets, but I don't believe we will be allowing pets.
Okay. All right. I'm a huge pet fan, but pets add a whole different dynamic to things. So I was just curious. No more questions.
So for the commission's information, on page 292, 293, Exhibit K, that's part of your development plan that you'll be adopting. That is your floor plan. So those do actually lock in the bedroom counts, the layouts, the decks, the open space, all that sort of thing. So that's your assurance. They'll either have to be consistent with that or come back for amendments in the future.
Thank you.
Thank you for that, Warren.
Mr. Christensen.
Thank you, Chairman Colbert. So this is just, I know I was noticing the no pets portion of the mitigation for conditions approval. I imagine that was the original approval that it's referring to?
And I'm sorry, regarding what?
Under the biological resources for mitigated measures for conditions of approval, page 258, actually 259. Just a curious question. It does say there are no pets such as dogs or cats be permitted. It also says no firearms. So is that something that still stands as well? Like if somebody had personal security or something to that effect?
So those
home security?
Sure. Those mitigation measures are specific to the construction of phase 2. And so that's related to biological resources that were put together by the biological consultant when the mitigated negative declaration was prepared. So the conditions of no firearms being allowed on the site and no pets, dogs or cats, that would be just during the construction phase. That's not applicable to the operations.
Great. Thank you for that clarity. Appreciate that.
Okay, we've gone through rounds of questions. We have a public hearing to conduct tonight, so open the public hearing and ask if there are any comments on this. Going to the room first, would anybody like to address the commission with comments on this specific proposal? Okay, hearing none for the moment. We will go to callers. Do we have callers that wish to participate?
No callers.
We do not. Okay, back to the room for one last time. Does anybody like to speak before the commission? If not, I will now close the public hearing and bring this back to the Planning Commission for discussion. Let's start with Commissioner Jorgensen. We'll start in the middle and work around it a bit.
I'm supportive of the project. I don't have any questions, and I don't share the concerns that some of my other commissioners have.
Thank you. Commissioner Gibson.
I think there's too many unanswered questions. I support the live-work concept. I just think this has too many unanswered questions. I strongly disagree with the concept of any mixture without having some sort of certainty. There's no clarity on the outdoor use. There's no clarity on the business hours. And respectfully, depending on the business, there could be very early hours and very late hours. That we have those downtown businesses that are allowed. I just view this as problematic and really lacking clarity in what's going to be. And I think it's going to be a state of flux. And if it gets passed, I anticipate it's going to be a problem for the city.
Commissioner Covarrubias.
Thank you. I don't have a problem with the live-work concept. I really don't. I think I liked the project a lot more, though, when it was a true mixed-use, residential top, commercial on the bottom. Just for simplicity, I think it's easier to clarify things, hone in on expectations and what is to be, to meet all the guidelines that are necessary. I'm on the fence. I'm trying to decide quickly. I am concerned that there are some things that do seem to be lacking as far as clarity. The end result, I guess, is the right word. But I'm not opposed to a live-work scenario. I really am not. I'm just trying to figure out if this is the best location and the best place for something like this, and if it truly will work. I'm very familiar with the area, and when that apartment complex went up right on, I think it's Experimental Way, a lot of the concerns from the homeowners there came to fruition when that thing came up. Understand needing living, more residential units, but it's creating that traffic in there is creating one heck of a mess. Parking is horrible along that area already. So I'm just trying to figure out if adding something like this in that vicinity is the right thing to do. So no more comment.
Mr. Christensen.
Thank you. I really liked the project when it first came in with the mixed use. I am in favor of that. I think it was a brilliant choice and design. I'm really struggling with this new approval. I think it's an end run on basically a multifamily project, calling it live work, knowing that it's really pretty much, I have a feeling there's a definite push for live here, which I get it. I could see that some people would really enjoy that. I really liked the upper units being residential when it was proposed as mixed use. I think I could see that happening without the other underlying issues coming into effect, some of the points that my other commissioners have made. Overall, I do have some issues with some of the traffic in the area, but simply, I like the mixed use. I have no problem with live work, but I feel in this case, for example, with the 2 additional units and then the fractionalized units, I feel like there's just, it's mixed use. That's what it was approved as, and there are so many other complications I think that come into play that haven't really been explained in my mind for changing it to pretty much multifamily. That's pretty much the best way I could explain it. So that's my comments on that. Thank you.
Thank you. As I referenced, I've sat through more discussions beyond this evening's meeting on this, and I've gotten more comfortable with this as it's gone through. I think it's important for this community to have a variety of housing types, and yes, maybe there's some opportunities downtown, but I think that's totally different than this, at least in some ways. I think having something that's unique, I personally, this in my lifestyle stage, this isn't for me, but it's for a lot of other younger people, much younger people that I know. We're talking about 4 units and 700 square feet per unit. These are essentially what I would have classified formerly as kind of studio-sized units, if you will. So this is not a huge addition to the housing supply or to the business supply, for that matter. It's a project that, at least the way it stands, is going to be under one ownership. That ownership is going to learn as they go through. Things like signs are pretty easy to scrape off of glass when it changes from one to another. The shades that have been talked about, the divisions that have been talked about, people are going to have to find those adequate or they're not going to want to live here. And so the market preferences are going to come to play too, as to who actually lives and works in these live-work units. So I think it's a great small-scale experiment to try this with the community and see how it works. I think the owners are going to learn from it. We're going to learn from it. And I think at its core, it has the potential to serve a housing niche in this community in a very small-scale way, but an important way, and maybe set the stage for more of these to come, different locations, different kinds of parameters. But I am supportive of the project. Discussion points, yes.
Chair, can I ask a question, another question?
Certainly, please do.
Staff, fast forward, this project is approved. 5 years from now, they want to sell it. I would assume the buyer would have to purchase it under the same conditions. They couldn't change it. Kind of back to what Commissioner Christensen was noting to, could they turn around and new buyers say, we're going to condo everything? I'm just curious.
So it seems that any changes would need to go through an amendment process, the same process that we're doing tonight. So as I mentioned, I'm not sure that as it stands, they could condo, and that could be a condition that maybe the Planning Commission wants to recommend move forward as this goes up to City Council, that it not be allowed, if that's what the concern is. But any changes to the project by future owners, and this is the whole site, so this is one parcel, and so they couldn't sell just these buildings, A and B. But any changes would have to go through an amendment process.
Okay, so you answered part B of my next question, was if they wanted to divide this parcel, because everything's on one APN, correct?
Yes.
So if they wanted to come back and divide the parcel, make it 2 APNs, they would have to go through they could technically do that or not?
Well, if they did that, then we'd have to evaluate the density, because the number of units that we're saying can be allocated, the 6 density units, and then which equates to 8 fractional units. That's all based on the developable area, and there's a formula for determining density on a site. So 6, if you subdivided it, I don't think that they could meet the requirement. So I don't see that being an option.
Okay, so that wouldn't be based on that calculation.
Correct.
Okay.
So any mapping, whether it's a tentative map to split or condos, those are maps. Those require going through the Planning Commission. You'd have to make findings of consistency with all your previous decisions. So any of those questions will have to come back through the Planning Commission if they're requested.
Got it. Okay. And if the commission does approve this, just to reiterate, it's going to the council next.
Yes.
Okay.
So the full project is a recommendation to City Council, because the surplus density allocation has to come from council, and then the amendment to the Bork area specific plan is also something that can only be authorized by council. So the whole project gets lumped together.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. Sorry, no more questions.
That's fine. Any other discussion points? Yes, Mr. Christensen.
I just wanted to reiterate, I'm not against live work. I think it's wonderful, but I think in this case, we're talking about an experiment that hasn't even occurred yet. We haven't even had the mixed use live work type proposal take effect, let alone adding additional ability for additional units, additional short-term rentals, condoing the project. There's another facet of things that can come to mind here. Again, I like the original mixed use development. That's something that I think would be wonderful.
Okay. Mr. Gibson.
I pretty much am in agreement with my commissioner. There are just too many unanswered questions here, and I'm not up for experiments, because experiments go wrong. I don't think that's good planning. I'm in favor of live work, but I'd like to have some clarity, and I think a lot of answers have to get or questions have to get answered. Really having to do with, like I said, the outdoor use, the business occupancy limits, business hours. We don't know any of that, and I'm not willing to experiment with a project like this that had more clarity. I would be in favor of it as it stands now, and especially with the constant word or refrain of any mixture. I have a real problem with that. That is not, I've never seen anything planned like that any mixture is going to be allowed. So yeah, any sort of combination of a mixed use or live work, I like that concept. I think we need it. I'm totally in favor of fractional units. I was on DRC twice, and I expressed both times I'm in favor of fractional units, because I think that allows for more affordable units, smaller units that people can't afford. People can't afford $2,200 for an apartment. And we do have a housing problem. So I'm in favor of that concept too. I don't think the clarity is here for this particular project. And honestly, it just comes across like the applicant wants it every way without having to commit to a way. And I'd like to have the clarity of a way and let us, vote up or down. But I think with clarity, this would actually pass unanimously.
Okay. Any other, yes, Commissioner
I'm
Koberger.
sorry.
No problem.
Can I ask a question, Darcy? Why does staff recommend this? I mean, I get you're proposing it. You've put the package together. You've done a lot of work on this. Why are you in favor of it?
So the, as presented and as conditioned, the findings could be made that it's consistent with, the mixed use overlay development standards. I think that Planning Commission needs to, with the privacy by design, those are findings that need to be made. And so the way the resolutions have been set up, I believe the Planning Commission can make those findings. Certainly, if you disagree with the way it's been designed and conditioned, then you could recommend it not be approved or go back for more analysis with staff or DRC. But as it's been presented, the fact that there's nothing that prohibits ground floor uses from being residential in the mixed use overlay just created a path forward, to be honest. And I think that the applicant has just massaged it enough, but staff didn't want to micromanage the conditions of approval related to hours of operation, because I don't think staff knows what's the right answer to that. So I think, the way it's set up, it's got the framework and it could move forward, but certainly there are things that if the Planning Commission wants more information on, this could go, be further reviewed, but it really is set up, I think, either way.
Okay. Thank you for that.
I have one question too, if you don't mind, Chairman Cogan. And maybe it's a question for Darcy. If the project moved forward as they originally proposed as mixed use, what would prevent them from coming back and requesting to modify the downstairs units as residential?
So you're asking if the project just got built today?
Yeah, let's say they did it. It was working great. They seem to have a lot of structure. It was something that, that part of the experiment, I'm sorry to keep using the word, I apologize, but would there be anything to prevent them from coming back and then requesting for the additional units to be added, other than the surplus units being gone? But is there anything to prevent that?
Well, no, they could come back and make the same request. If the project was built today, they could come back and then it would be just dependent on if there were still surplus units at that time.
Of course.
To allocate.
Okay. Thank you. I appreciate that.
Okay. It's pretty evident we're not of all like minds here this evening. It doesn't happen all that often, but we're all independent thinkers, so we form our own conclusions. I would be looking for a motion from someone consistent with what's in front of us on the screen, and it would seem that option one, to approve the project, would be one viable course. Approving the project with modifications is probably more cumbersome than this body could undertake. Referring it back to staff and DRC for additional analysis seemingly would be another path one could follow, or if the mindset is there, make findings to deny the application. So with that as a framework, is there a motion anybody would like to offer on this? Please do.
I move to approve draft resolution A with staff's recommended changes, recommending approval of City Council to amend PD 14-003 and CUP 14-006, excluding the ability to I'm searching for the wording, to not be condominium, excluding any current or future potential to have condominium structure.
And just for clarification, would that motion also include the CEQA exemption findings for A, B, and C, as well as the omission of number 9 under the standard conditions in A, as we've talked about tonight?
Yeah, it would eventually, but I was going to do them one at a time.
Okay. Okay. So
that would, the condominium, the precluding condominiumization would be, at this point in time, the only amendment I would be expecting to add to A or B or C.
Okay.
And I assume A is the appropriate one for that.
We did have a blanket suggestion that the CEQA exemption finding should be applied to A, B, and C. Is that correct?
That would be fine.
Okay. All right. So it's A as stated with the exemption. Okay. We have a motion on the floor. Do we have a second? know it's not often done, but it's not unheard of. I will second the motion for discussion. We have a motion and a second on the floor. Further discussion?
Mr. Chairman, I just don't think it goes far enough. My preference would be option 3 and address the issues and concerns that have been expressed. I don't think this project should fail. I just don't think it's ready. My preference would be for it to be going back to staff and DRC, the applicant to answer the questions and concerns.
Very well. You may get a chance to do that.
I have a problem. I don't have a problem with the PD 14-003. I just don't agree with the CUP as the addition. I'd rather, and I don't know if this is even possible, approving the project as it was originally before these changes, but I don't think that's before us tonight. So.
Okay, thank you. Other commissioners have comments? Hearing and seeing none, I will ask, we have a motion, we have a second. I would ask staff to call the roll.
Commissioner Jorgensen?
Aye.
Chairman Kogler?
Aye.
Commissioner Christensen?
No.
Commissioner Gibson?
No.
Commissioner Covarrubias?
No.
Motion fails.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, I move that we refer this project back to staff and DRC for additional analysis and to give direction to the applicant to specifically address the concerns that have been expressed by the planning commissioners.
I'll certainly entertain that as a motion. I would just like to comment that I would presume without the passage of A, there is no further consideration of B and C, so option 3 would be an appropriate motion.
Any motion is appropriate.
There we go.
I will second that motion.
We have a motion and we have a second. Do we have any further discussion? Okay, I again would ask for the roll to be called.
Commissioner Gibson?
Aye.
Commissioner Christensen?
Aye.
Commissioner Covarrubias?
Aye.
Commissioner Jorgensen?
Aye.
Chairperson Kogler?
Aye.
Motion passes 5-0.
Okay, thank you. I presume staff and the applicant can be in touch with one another to discuss next steps. And I do hope the message that's taken out of here is there is interest and support for the project, but with some nuances that need to be worked out a little bit more. Is that a fair statement?
That's a fair statement.
Good, thank you. All right, we are done with public hearings on our agenda. We're moving into item H, which is discussion items by staff. Do we have any of those?
There are none.
Perfect answer. Item I is consent calendar. I don't believe, had DRC minutes in the packet, but we do have Planning Commission minutes from May 24th. We would need a review and approval of those. Any changes to those?
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, sir.
On page 308, there was discussion on that project, and as it stands, it says no overnight camping to be allowed, but that actually, I believe, was added. The original proposal recommendation from staff was there's no RV camping and then no camping at all. So I'd just like that to be clarified.
Sure.
Item number C.
All right.
It referenced specifically RV, and then we added on no camping at all.
So it's meant to cover both RV and any other form of camping.
Correct.
Thank you for the clarification. I recall that as well.
The clarification under
Item
C, where it says no overnight camping shall be allowed within the property, is supposed to read as what?
Well, the staff report, which we amended, started off saying no overnight stays, no overnight RV stays. And
So should it clarify that it's no RV or
stays
overnight?
Or camping,
Okay.
meaning you could be in a tent or something else, right?
So it's no RV or camping.
Correct.
Okay, any other changes?
Okay.
If there are none, I would ask you to call the roll for approval of minutes.
Need a motion.
Yeah, I guess we need a motion, don't we? I think Commissioner Gibson just made that motion with
I'll move the approval of the Planning Commission minutes.
I'll second it.
We have a motion and a second. Now, let's see how we want to vote.
Commissioner Gibson.
Aye.
Christensen.
Aye.
Covarrubias.
Aye.
Jorgensen.
Aye.
Kogler.
Aye.
Passes 5-0.
Okay, item J is other reports. We have a few to address. The first one I can cover quite easily, Paso Robles Streetscape Ad Hoc Committee. We really haven't met, but we're meeting on the 18th next.
Thursday, August 18th, 3 p.m.
3 o'clock.
City Hall.
Or Teams, if need be.
And virtual is available.
Yeah, I'm moving around. So, okay, got it. All right. Any other comments or additions to that one? If not, we'll move on to the Housing Opportunities and Constraints Committee and Zoning Code update.
Sure. So there's no update for HCOC. However, there is an update for the zoning code. So staff is working with MIG. We're still working on the first batch of changes, which are quite substantial, but staff is just wanting to check everything very really in depth, so it's taking some time, but the plan is to bring back some items for discussion, like a study session the next couple months, so we just have to pin down a date of when we would do that. But there's lots to discuss.
Very good, thank you. Item 7 under J is DRC rotation schedule. Any changes anybody would like to note there? Okay, it's good for the moment, could change any week. Item K, Planning Commissioner comments. Let's start with Mr. Christensen.
I just wanted to say that thank you, everybody. I appreciate all the discussion tonight. And Darcy, thanks for the presentation. I know it was pretty complicated. That one had a lot of moving parts, so I appreciate it, all your patience with us. So thank you.
Mr. Gibson.
I'll just echo his comments and then add the first presentation as well. I think staff did a great job tonight representing the projects on behalf of the applicants. Good job.
Okay. Mr. Covarrubias.
Yeah, I'll echo that. Great presentation on number 1. Number 2 also was a good presentation. Honestly, my first situation where something didn't pass, so that was kind of weird, to be honest with you. And yeah. I mean, I'm definitely pro yes, but yeah, this one was a little tough for me. But I do appreciate all the efforts, and I do think that there's a solution on that one item. And once it gets back to DRC, I think we can figure it out and get it through, at least us. So, anyways, thank you for all the work today.
Okay, Commissioner Jorgensen. My only comment would be that there have been, for your comments and patience and sorting through that issue, because it was not an easy one. And
we're about to start the Jeopardy theme song.
Okay, it wraps up Planning Commissioner's comments. How about staff comments?
Okay, well, there's a lot going on. So first of all, we are starting to move ahead quickly with a community discussion about cannabis policies and rules within the community. So next Thursday evening, there's going to be a workshop here in the chamber. It's going to be hosted by our consultant. We've hired HDL to go through the process of community outreach and policy development. So this will eventually come back to the Planning Commission. So we would encourage the Planning Commission to either listen virtually or show up in the room and listen. We wouldn't advise you to participate so that you can vote later on it. But it would be good just to kind of hear where the discussion's going. They'll be talking about the full range of cannabis legalization issues, everything from cultivation to manufacturing to testing to distribution to storefront retail. All those issues are open for discussion. So that will be the workshop. That will be next Thursday. I believe the public notices will be coming out in the next day or so. So we'll make sure the commission's all copied on that.
Is that 6:30, Warren, and single purpose workshop, correct?
It's single purpose workshop. I think it's at 6:30. I'm still waiting for the notice.
All right.
At the same time, so the city council did do a quick study session end of July on this issue, and that basically kicked off this workshop issue. At the same time, the city council did provide direction to staff to change our existing rules for medical marijuana delivery operations in town. So right now, we do allow the delivery of medical marijuana if you have we allow offices to be established in the city that then operate medical marijuana delivery. So that's the only type of cannabis marijuana operations that are allowed in town. And we have 2 CUPs that have been issued up on Black Oak Drive. What the council's asked staff to do is to go through the process of amending the rules for medical marijuana delivery offices to also allow them to deliver recreational cannabis out of the same facilities, which would be a code change and potentially a change to those existing CUPs. So we are, and the council wanted to move fairly quickly on that. We do expect that to be agendized for your next meeting. So we're working with the city attorney on preparing what that code text change looks like. It will be a little confusing because it'll look and sound very similar to the general discussion we're having about recreational marijuana, although it'll be isolated to those 2 delivery businesses. So just be aware that this will be confusing to the public and it will be confusing to everybody involved. But that is the direction we're moving forward on. We'll try to make it as clear as possible what we're doing and why we're doing 2 simultaneous things that are very, very similar. The 18th, like a week and a half.
Not this.
Yeah. Okay. So staffing wise at the city, there's been a number of significant changes in the last couple weeks. So Julie Dolan, who's been the longtime community services director, and community services is basically the parks and recreation and library division, as well as landscape maintenance. Julie's been with the city for 25-ish plus years. She's retiring, so her last day will be next week. Angelica Fortin, who is our head librarian or was, has been appointed as the new community services director. So she's been promoted. So that's, great. You'll probably see Angelica around more now that she's going to be involved in running that whole operation, especially whenever we're dealing with parks issues. So that's a fairly significant change. Another big change that's happened as part of the budget process. The council decided to split the public works division into 2 separate divisions. So we now have a utilities division. So Christopher Alekel, who was the public works director, has become the utilities division director. And utilities is basically wastewater, water, and what's the other one? Landfill. Those 3 operations. No, we don't. That's public works. So anyways, so that's a new division. And then public works remains, but we didn't have a director there. So Frida Berman, who's been in community services, basically overseeing all the capital projects and all the maintenance projects for community services, has been appointed as public works director. So Frida is now the public works director. She is now in charge of the airport, public works operations, which is street maintenance, landscape maintenance, fleet maintenance, basically stay under public works that Frida, will be in charge of. So just be aware, there's a lot, basically 3 new directors, which is about half the directors in the city in the last 2 weeks. So we're getting everybody up to speed. It's all good, but it's a lot of change. At the same time, you've probably heard that Councilmember Garcia has moved out of town, which automatically vacated her seat. She was an at-large council member because she was elected before the districting, but she has been assigned District 2. So if she decided to stay and rerun, that her position was up this December, and she was going to be basically assigned to District 2. So she's vacated her position. That seat's currently empty. The council held a special meeting last night to talk about what to do with that position. The direction they have given is to do advertising for somebody to be appointed to that position. They're looking to make that appointment before the end of August. That appointment would only be for basically 3 months. That appointment would end at the end of the term, which is basically, I think, December 31st. So the appointment can be at large. Anybody within the city limits can be appointed, but for the short term. Yeah, but anyone elected to the seat in the election will have to be within District 2. Yeah, so just know that's all going on. So I think there's public notices for appointments and that sort of thing going on. And we're still waiting for the election, filing to be completed to see if anybody actually files for District 2. Okay, other things going on. So construction-wise, if you've been driving around on the east side of town, there's a lot of big things going on. So we closed Union and Golden Hill, I think yesterday. So they're starting construction on the roundabout. The Red Tail Apartments next to Food for Less, the construction's going up. The framing is in process. The widening of the road is in process. They've got the road basically choked down to 2 lanes. So that project is going ahead very quickly now. And then as you get out to Olson, all the mass grading is moving ahead out there as well. So they're making good progress on that as well. So 3 giant projects we've been talking about for a number of years are all starting to move fairly quickly. You've got the Residence Inn Hotel down on South Vine under construction. That's, the grading that's going on across from Firestone. Hotel Ava, they do have their permits over there on 10th and Pine. We're thinking they're going to be starting construction very soon, but they still haven't yet. So we're waiting to see when that one actually starts moving forward. So I think those are kind of the big things we're looking at. Anything else, Darcy? So that's the end of the staff's report.
Very good, thank you. We
We're
are
building a fire station.
We're to the point of our agenda that we would seek a motion to adjourn. Would anyone have one? And I'll second. We have a motion, we have a second. All in favor, aye? Aye, we're done.